scoops.
Hi guys, my name is Barry and welcome back to the channel. And today I've got another episode of Double Scoops. This is episode 4, I believe. It is, yeah, episode 4. And I've got Davey Deathray on to discuss a little bit of Halloween H20 today. How are you, Davey?
Doing great, Barry. Thanks for having me on. I know you're enjoying a little bit of a bachelor week here, so really pumped that you've been able to kind of, work on your stuff, and always great to hang out with you. I was, this morning I was talking to my wife and I'm like, man, 2016, 2017, when I started like watching you, never would I have imagined that I'd be on here talking some Halloween. So always a pleasure.
It's a pleasure having you on, Davey. Now, one thing I always notice when I do these live streams is obviously you're in the background when I do my intro, and every single person that's been on Double Scoops so far, when the intro comes on with double scoops, and then the music comes on, everybody does this. I can see in
You
the
got
back.
it. Yeah. Oh
It's
yeah.
a good little tune by, I think
Yeah.
it's White Bat Audio that does that, I'm sure.
Mhm.
It's good stuff. So in today's video, I'll let the guys come in as we're talking, but in today's video, it's going to be about Halloween H2O and why we're wrong. And what we mean by that, and it's Davey and myself that came up with this idea that we can have a civil conversation, and hopefully anyone who pops in and out of this video can maybe take some ideas from this and go, do you know what, we can have an adult debate and disagree on something like adults without calling each other names. And that's what this is about. Halloween H2O is one of the most divisive movies in the Halloween franchise. And there's some good about it. There's some bad about it. Even I love the film, but I know there's some negatives. David doesn't love the film. He doesn't hate it. He doesn't love it, but he knows there's some positives. So what we're going to do is I'm going to tell David why I like certain things about it. David can then counter his point for the points that I'm making, and then vice versa. I'll do the same with Davey. So does that sound about right to you, Davey?
That sounds great. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Are you excited to get all the negatives out the way without having an argument?
I am. I totally agree with you. I think something I always say on the channel is like all opinions are welcome, as long as, like, to me, not even as long as, but it's even better if you can explain why you feel the way you feel, why you have that opinion. I think to me it's fascinating to know why something either works or doesn't work. If I have a disagreement of opinion with somebody else, I think it kind of helps inform my opinion moving forward. So then that way, when I go and revisit that film, maybe I see, that little bit, that element that person was praising, maybe I recognize that more, and it can kind of, change the way I feel. So I don't think, especially when it comes to opinions on art, it's not a political thing. I don't think you need to, stand your ground or put a line in the sand. I think that it's one of those things where it's okay if that opinion kind of sways through time. So whereas I was really high on H2O, obviously, when it came out, I was, 16 years old. Saw it in the theater. It was my first Halloween movie in the theater. So, and it was the best one in a really long time. So it's just been interesting kind of seeing how that opinion has changed throughout the years.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also with that as well, Davey, and you'll see it online all the time where you see someone will do like a mini review for a film, and one thing that they always say is either that's the best film I've ever seen or that's the worst film I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And for that to be the case, it's very rare. You're not going to, like, for me, Titanic is my favorite film of all time. So I won't constantly, every time I see a movie, and say it's the best film I've ever seen, because the best film that you've ever seen and the best film I've ever seen is probably a 10 out of 10, a 5 out of 5. And how rare is that? And it's the same with the worst film ever made. Like, the worst film is probably, for me, the worst film is probably like a 1.5 out of 10, roughly. No film deserves a 0, but I will see people saying 0 out of 10, worst film ever.
Yeah.
And like, you're just over exaggerating your opinion because you didn't like something. I understand you didn't like it, but let's not go too heavy handed on it, whether it's something that you love or whether it's something that you hate. And hopefully in today's debate, we can do that. So I know for a fact, well, it's not a fact, I know for opinion that Halloween H2O is not the worst film in the franchise. And I know for an opinion that it's not the best. And What would do you feel the same? It's not the worst and it's not the best.
Yeah, I would probably put it like middle to end. It's probably about 2/3 the way through my ranking, something like that. But my ranking kind of changes, you know, every time I rewatch these movies. So, you know, some movies move up, some movies scooch back, just depending on, you know, what I recognize or notice each time I watch the movie. And yeah, I mean, I think people, the whole thing, especially with like social media and, you know, when people voice their opinions online, it's like, they take things to the extreme because it gets a reaction and it gets noticed. You know, the internet and social media loves for things to be lit on fire, either in a good way or a bad way. So I think when people say, oh, it's the best or the worst, they just want that engagement and that interaction. But I think like anything else, I really like when opinions or art or whatever is like the phrase I use is well measured. So I think like, you know, in today's video, I think that what you and I are going to do is it's going to be a well-measured approach to the positives and the negatives.
Yeah, I think so too. And also another point just before we get into the chats is when you or I, when we see something online that says best movie ever, the first thing I do is I click on that person's account to see how legit they are, and then I check out the reviews. And if the reviews are a good quality, then I might take them on their word. But if I don't see a channel, or if I see a channel that just says best, this is the best and this is the worst, I'm like, okay, I won't take it into consideration. But one thing I don't like, and I guess it's everybody's fault, is I could genuinely say something is amazing, and then I'll get comments from people saying, you're only saying that because it's fresh in your mind, or you're only saying that because you're Gen Z, even though I'm not. And I'm like, you know, you're just assuming that I like it because of something, because of a trend. But whether it's part of a trend or not, I genuinely like it. It's like Long Legs. I really like Long Legs. Thought it was excellent. And I think people will automatically think you're just saying that because you're young. I wish. Or you're just saying that because it's new and everybody's saying it's amazing. I'm like, well, no, I just genuinely really liked it. And sometimes you go with the majority, and it's okay to do that. But it's also okay to go with the minority. Don't do it because you want attention. Do it because it's your opinion, you know? So
yeah, I think you got to just kind of search your feelings on stuff like that. And that's why, you know, when my wife and I put together our non-spoiler review for Long Legs, we made it a point to not go too heavy-handed with the praise, because I think the best thing for a movie like Long Legs, you know, a lot of movies have hype surrounding them. So I think the best thing that a reviewer can do is just, you know, without being, you know, getting too fantastical about it, just to say if you enjoyed it or not and say why. And a big point that we wanted to make is we want everybody to go check this out in the theater without having those expectations raised so high that no film could ever reach them. I think that's a big issue too. So yeah, while I think that Long Legs is, I mean, it's incredibly impressive, technically speaking, it's a beautifully made film. And I feel like it will appeal to a wide range of people, because I think it'll appeal to horror fans, but it also appeal to those people that watch like crime shows, or, you know, a lot of the British television, like the investigative kind of stuff, and crime thrillers like Silence of the Lambs. So I think like, yeah, it's one of those movies that, you know, you can go out and be like, oh my God, this was the most disturbing movie I've ever seen. But that doesn't really serve the film. I kind of go with the marketing of the film, which is like sort of be understated. Let the film speak for itself.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. That's exactly how I would try and explain it myself. So let's go into the chat first of all, and then we'll get on to our points. I just want to read this one out quite quickly because it's got nothing to do with the video, but it's important to me. And it's from Gill Games. Gill Games said, hey, I just watched Final Destination 4 and 5 for the first time. 4 was bad. 5 was great. That twist was incredible. The reason I'm reading that out is because in my last video, I told Gill Games to watch Final Destination 5 because it's got a great twist in it, an unexpected twist. A twist that didn't need to be there, but because it was there, it made it a whole lot better. So I thought I'd read that out. So well done, Gill Games, for watching it. I knew you'd like the twist. Don't want to say it just in case people haven't seen it, but
yeah,
good twist. Good twist. So who's in the chat? Dog Tanyan. Dog Tanyan's not here. He said can't make this live event, but we'll watch it later. So yeah, definitely check it later on if you can. I've got a new member as well. That's what she said as a new member. So that's what she said. That's what she said. Thanks very much for that. Who else have we got? We've got Michael Dammit, who says argument. Yep, there's going to be
Blood
lots of
will be
arguments.
drawn.
That's why I'm not drinking beer. I'm drinking water. We also got Byron Weaver's here.
How's it going,
Gene's here
Byron?
as well. Hi, Gene.
Gene.
Antonis is here. O'Banion is here. Oh, wish they kept the H6 mask through the entire movie. You loser.
Interesting.
I will say, though, before I go back into anything else, I did do a poll yesterday, guys, and I put up a poll of which mask do you prefer, the curse mask or the H2O mask. Now, the curse mask that I showed intentionally showed the worst part of it, where you see his neck's like 18 inches wide. And people are like, oh, I love that. I'm like, what? How do you love that? Anyway, terrible mask, but it won the vote with 64%. So I'm in the minority. Boo me. I'm wrong. So you win the first argument, Davey, before we even begin.
Count it.
Gene said, I don't hate Halloween H2O. I'm taking that as a win.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't hate it either. Vanderhoff's here. Vanderhoff said, I'm Gen X. What's Gen X? What year is that again? Do you know?
Yeah, I think Gen X is like you're born in like sometime 60s, in the 70s.
60s to the 70s, is it?
Oh, he says 68, so maybe it's like late 60s to mid 70s.
Yeah.
Because I'm in that weird spot where, like, you know what, I was born in 82. Are you 83?
Yeah.
So we're in that weird spot where it's like, I don't know what the hell we are. They call us like Zennials because it's between X and millennial.
Yeah, something like that. I don't. Maybe we're unique.
Yeah, I never paid attention to any of that kind of talk.
I only heard about it a few years ago when Gen Z came out. Who else have we got here? Oh, Michael Dammett's 77, so he's not too far in front of us. Punkachino said, hey, Barry and Davey, just back from seeing Longlegs. Didn't think the night could get any better, but here we are. There you go.
That's awesome.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you'll get better than Longlegs in this video. You never know.
That's glowing praise.
Yeah, absolutely. And who else? Oh, we've also got T. Parker Evans. Here, y'all. I'm going to be in Switzerland. I'm going to be Switzerland here. I was going to say I'm going to be in Switzerland. I'm going to be Switzerland here, who loves H2O, but can't even get my words out. Who loves H2O, but it's in the middle of my ranking, number 6. That's fair enough. Number 6 is quite high, I would imagine, for H2O. So yeah, that's not too bad. There you go. O'Banion said, early 80s are millennials, born in 88 myself. Looked it up. Yeah. Well, we could have done that as well, but I never thought of that.
It's weird. I guess it's odd to me because the term millennials just started getting used within the last like 15 years. So to not hear it for a big part of your life and then people tell you you're part of that feels kind of odd to me. I never heard that term until the early 2000s.
That's strange. The reason I'm kind of mentioning this is because sometimes it depends what age you are, whether you liked a certain film in the franchise or not. You know, so maybe born in 83, teen slasher movies of the late 90s are like prime for me. They could be for you as well. You're obviously 82, so you weren't far in front, but that's prime for me. And it was my entry to horror. I was in horror way before that. I was watching the classics all the time. But for me to get really interested in horror, it was all these teen slashers that were coming out. Urban Legend, I know we did last summer. You know, all those movies, and H2O was one of them, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's also like the age you are when you see a movie is really important too. Because even like, you know, a movie like Jaws, which is my favorite film of all time, I probably saw it when I was like 4 or 5 for the first time. But then I've met people that the first time they saw it, they're in their 20s or 30s. And they are like, oh, the shark doesn't look so good. They look at it through a totally different lens because they didn't grow up with it. So I think it's kind of similar like that with H2O. And I think it'll be interesting with the David Gordon Green movies, like in 20 years, what the people that are being born like within the last 10 years, what they think of those movies once they start watching them. So that's the cool thing about film and perspective. You know, it's like, you know, when the film was made, when you saw it in your life, and then, you know, if you're a fan of the genre, it kind of all comes together.
Yeah, I think the David Gordon Green trilogy in 20 years are going to be classics to people.
Oh, yeah. They better be.
Yeah, they will be. But then in 20 years' time, there'll be classics to, say, Gen Z. And then a new batch of Halloween films will come out and people will be like, oh, that's pretty good. But I prefer the old classics like Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, there was a time that people hated Halloween Ends, but now it's a classic.
Yep, so, absolutely.
Happens all the time. Look, Halloween 3, Halloween 4, they're classics now. There are some genuinely bad films that are never going to be classic, you know, but
Mhm.
sometimes they grow on people. There you
Yeah.
go. So I'll read a couple more comments out and then we'll get into our first point. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Right. So Jordan Stevenson said, I don't hate H2O. It's a good start. I'll take it over the Thorn trilogy and Rob Zombie's movies, but I have the same issues with it that Frank and Darren have with it from The Slaughtered Lamb and Mr.
Mhm.
McRae. So yeah, we'll get into some of those points because I know that Dave McRae, he doesn't hate H2O, but he
Mhm.
thinks it's one of the lesser quality films with some points that I've got a counter for anyway. And I think he kind of sides with you, Davey, with some of the things. So
Mhm.
we'll get into that. And also, O'Banion said, main problem for me with H2O is that it just doesn't feel like a Halloween movie. Interesting.
Mhm.
Doesn't have the same vibe. Also interesting because that's my first point. So I'll start, David. If you want to counterpoint me at
Yeah.
any point, interrupt me, whatever, you certainly can. And if you've got the same points as me, don't worry about it. So the first one is the film is set in California and not Haddonfield. Because it's a positive for me, I'm going to put this to you first of all, Davey. What do you
Mhm.
feel? How do you feel not being set in Haddonfield and being set in California instead?
I think to me, I really don't think about that point too much. I really like the one of the points I was going to make for a positive because I feel like the only way you can really earn the negatives is to acknowledge the things that the film does well. So I do the opening in Langdon, Illinois. I really like that vibe there. To me, that's like they're kind of setting the tone for a nice like fall atmosphere and everything. So I really like how it starts. At least when they're in Summer Glen, there are the dirt roads and, the wet ground and everything like that. So yeah, you're in California, but there is a little bit of that vibe that kind of puts you in the fall. To me, it's, when O'Banion says doesn't feel like a Halloween movie, doesn't have the same vibe. For me, I don't think so much about like the time of year or the setting. It's more about like the way the film is shot and the music to me, or what kind of takes it away from the Halloween movie vibe for me, more so than the setting.
Yeah, that's fine. So here's some of the shots. I don't have all the shots in the film, obviously, but here's some clips, images, sorry, of the non-Halloween theme and
Mm-hmm.
H2O. And to me, that looks pretty damn good.
Yeah,
Here
the
is
first, yeah.
here's
Mm-hmm.
California. Now that reminds me of Halloween 4, where Vincent Drug
Mm-hmm.
is set. What else have we got? Some trick-or-treaters there.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I will say about, because it's in California, obviously it's going to be we're supposed to look hotter, even though it's filmed in the same area as the first movie. But with this movie here, I think it's got that kind of orangey hue to it that makes it feel very autumn-like to me, like very auburn color,
Mm-hmm.
kind of burnt orange. And automatically, to me, it feels like a Halloween film. It's got that Halloween vibe to it. But with it being set in California, this goes with the story of being more realistic than all of the other films in the franchise. That if you were Laurie Strode and your brother survived the fire and you couldn't find his body, would you just stay in Haddonfield?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you would leave.
Mm-hmm.
You'd leave and get out of that and most likely change your name. So I think when you want to get a more grounded Halloween movie, the best thing to do is go with the flow with the story. Your brother is missing. You don't know where he is. So get the hell out of there. Go to
Yeah.
California, change your name, become a principal teacher in a private high school. And that's exactly what you've done. So when it
Yeah.
comes to the setting for me, that's my positives, that it feels more realistic. Sorry. Negatives for that, the only thing I can think of would be a lot of people associate Halloween with Haddonfield.
Mm-hmm.
So with no Haddonfield, Haddonfield's like a character
Yeah.
within the movies. So you're removing one of the main characters that is Haddonfield. So when you're doing that, you need to do something good with it. That's my only negative. Have
Mm-hmm.
you got any other points about that, Davey, about
Yeah. I mean, I
California?
think Yeah, I think it's kind of low hanging fruit just to be like, oh, it's not in the same place. So, it doesn't have the same feeling, or now I don't like it, because there's so many more other elements that go into making a movie have that kind of Halloween feel. And I think they do a pretty good job, especially, I mean, that first shot that you showed of the mother just really doing a haphazard job of cutting. That is a very dangerous way to create a jack-o'-lantern, especially with children around. But that all that Langdon stuff looks great. It really, I think this movie starts off on such a great note. Like, for me, the first third of this movie is really, really damn solid. And then after that, it kind of starts disintegrating, in my opinion. So, I mean, for me, the Halloween feel, I get what people are saying, because sometimes you see those tropical plants that are, in California, or you see, it's sunny and all that stuff. But hey, I live in Phoenix, Arizona, where it's sunny and warm during Halloween, but you still kind of can get those feelings, So yeah, I feel like that's a pretty valid point to me. Having the film in California, really the only thing that I think is like a true gripe is, how does Michael go from Langdon, Illinois, 6 or 7 p.m. one evening? How is he in California the next morning? Like that, to me, that's the more unbelievable aspect. Is it supernatural?
So that's the thing about me, is I don't know how long it would take to get from A to B. So for me, that wasn't ever an issue, because I don't know how long it takes to get from Illinois to California. I'd never even checked. I don't know how many hours that would take to drive.
It would probably be about a day. It would be, I would imagine that driving time, you're looking at about like 20 hours or something like that.
Right. So is it for him for the movie? Was that just a day?
That's what I would imagine. Yeah, because I think it's at the end of one night, right? The sun sets. Well, Nurse Marion, they call the police after the house is broken into. The sun sets. It's completely dark. Michael kills off the first 3 people and drives away. And then the next morning, he's there at the rest stop, waiting actually at the rest stop. So he's been there even before the mom and daughter show up in a car from the 1940s, which is a really interesting choice, but I like that car.
Yeah. I just checked that it's 30 hours drive.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty so, but I mean, that's like, you could do that with any movie, right? You can like nitpick little like timing things and stuff, but it's like, for me, it's the fact that the movie takes place in California, and I'm like, I don't mind when movies take chances, as long as everything else makes sense and feels like it belongs. So for me, the setting is something that doesn't distract me as much as some of the other things I'll talk about.
Considering as well that both films were filmed in the same location, so you would imagine they would feel the same, regardless of where they're supposed to be set. They were both filmed in the same area, so therefore they would feel the same. Well, to me, they felt the same anyway. But so, would you overall say then California being the setting is more of a negative than a positive? We're not going to be scoring anything, Davey, so don't worry if you agree with me more than I agree with you, whatever. But how would you feel about California being a negative or a positive? Where would you swing?
I think for most people, I see people bring that up. So I think for a lot of people, that dislike the movie, or, have unfavorable opinions, that's something that's brought up most of the time. For me, it's never been an issue. So I don't really see it as a positive or a negative. It's just kind of like you're saying, I mean, it's all shot in that kind of, LA area. And even in the original Halloween, you can see palm trees way down the street. They had to bring the same bag of leaves to throw all over the place. So it's like they're still faking it till they make it. Just, it's the movie magic and everything like that. So I see it as kind of, just kind of right in the middle. But I think for some people, it's, people usually have like 3 points they like to bring up when they are wanting to rip on H20. They just want to say that the mask is trash. They don't like the California setting, and they don't like the Ottman score. And they pretty much leave it without any sort of embellishment. And I think all of those things, if you're really going to make a good point, and to go back to the well-measured thing, I think, you can give some more specific reasons why these things don't work, and then be fair in the moments when they do work.
Yeah, no, I agree. Next point then, David, if you want, you can bring up the next topic if you want, if you've got anything that you're really wanting to talk about in mind.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I wanted to bring up, and it's kind of a, like I said, the first act of this film, I really enjoy that first scene, especially I really enjoy, with Nurse Marion and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, the two teenagers and everything. I love the vibe and everything of that scene. I do wish, there's 2 off-screen kills there. I kind of wish that we saw at least one of those off-screen kills. And I really love there's a few shots with the curse mask here. I know we brought that up earlier. And I know that Steve Miner, that's something that I think was done without his knowledge, because I've heard that he was pretty pissed off that the curse mask snuck in there. But that shot of, yeah, of course, yes. And that shot, though, of him, when he opens up the door and not Jimmy, but the other teenager, like, falls over dead.
Yeah.
And you get that shot of him, the slow motion shot of him turning the corner in the curse mask. I just absolutely love that. Like, that for me is where it's at. But I do think it's, evident here, and it pops up throughout the whole movie. This movie is trying to kind of exist in 2 different worlds. And for me, it kind of, it has a little bit of an identity crisis. On the one hand, this movie is trying to be a legacy sequel to the first 2 films. And so it's living in those trappings of the original Halloween and, the way that John Carpenter and Dean Cundey would shoot a film. And then on the other hand, it is trying to do that Scream faculty. I think a lot of people usually compare it to like a WB show because Steve Miner's directing and he did a whole bunch of the Dawson's Creek stuff. So I think to me, it's like pulling back and forth. It's like, do you want to be kind of like the Nightmare on Elm Street remake? It's like, are you trying to be something new, or are you trying to be the old thing? Because to me, the back and forth as an audience member kind of pulls me out of the film a little bit. And that is evident in the beginning with, I think the score has its moments. I really like the teases with the orchestral score, the little flares and flavors it presents. But I think when it goes into the full theme, it's way too whimsical, too many woodwind instruments. They start making up their own melodies within the original theme, which I think would be fine later on in the film, but especially at the beginning of the film, I feel like maybe they need to, bring us back into the original kind of Halloween feel, to where it feels just like it's trying a bit too much to be that modern, popular thing. So for me, that's something throughout the film that kind of pulls me back and forth. Moments here and there that work, but then overall just feeling like it's trying to be something that it really isn't in its essence.
You've covered too many points at once, though. You've covered like the mask, the score, etc. When we talk about the score, like specifically the score first. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the score, I know that's a big issue for a lot of people, and I guess yourself then. Because there's 2 issues here. One is the John Ottman score, the Academy Award winning John Ottman, I should mention. His score was too orchestral for the film, and it's not just the audience that agree with that. I don't, but a lot of people agree with that. Not just the audience, though. The producers, the director, they all thought doesn't really fit the theme of Halloween. So they decided, let's try and bring in Marco Beltrami to do the rest of it. They didn't have enough time, so they had to reuse some of Marco Beltrami's earlier work that was used in Scream 1, Scream 2, and The Faculty. One thing I noticed that people don't complain about in The Faculty is the score, but they reuse Scream music anyway. But they had to do it because they were in a rush. It doesn't mean it's bad. I still like the Marco Beltrami score, but they tried to mix some of the John Ottman score in to the Marco Beltrami mix, and it felt rushed to me. So the annoying thing about the film, well, it's not annoying to me, but the annoying thing is, yes, I do agree that the score was all over the place simply because they couldn't make up their mind. I think they should have either went with Marco Beltrami or John Ottman and not mix it together. Personally, I would have went with the John Ottman score. I've listened to it. I've listened to it all and I absolutely love it. It is orchestral and it is different to every other Halloween film, but this was supposed to be different. This was supposed to be the finale. And I think when I listen to orchestra and orchestral music, it sounds epic and big, like Gladiator from 2000, James Horner, Titanic. It sounds huge, grand, and epic, like an epic finale. You're building up to something final. And that's exactly what this was trying to aim for. So I feel like if they kept the John Ottman score in there, it would have been better. I'm I know I'm in the majority. So the majority, I'm in the
Mhm.
minority. I know that for a fact that I'm in the minority. But for me, the orchestral score just works, and so does John Ottman. But I have to remind everyone, Marco Beltrami and John Ottman have been nominated for Academy Awards time and time again.
Mhm.
So regardless, both of them are fantastic. I take you're just not a fan of the score at all then, whether it's John Ottman or Marco Beltrami?
I really do, like, I love those little flares, you know, in that opening scene when Michael, you know, once the police officers go into the, you know, the second house or whatever, and Michael pulls out, they do these really nice teases of the score. They do it. Yeah, they do the same thing when you see the blown out tires at the rest stop. Like, you get these little flares, and I love that orchestral touch on those little
Mhm.
flares. I think
I know what
for
you
me,
mean.
maybe it just gets a little too boisterous with so many instruments. The woodwinds get like really like fluttery and whimsical. And there are a couple times where, to me, it just doesn't seem to fit the tone of what you're seeing visually on the screen. So I think there's again a little bit of that identity crisis. And then to your point, as far as like, I would prefer too if it were just stick with one composer. Like the overarching theme for me in this movie is the inconsistency in so many different realms. This movie feels like it's a production shit show, and you know that is part of the producer's problems, of course. You know, the Weinsteins were notorious for messing with movies. This isn't the only one that they did that with. It was like
Totally
every
not.
movie they messed around with. And then I think some of the blame falls on Steve Miner, because ultimately he's the director of the film, and you know, to me it's the responsibilities there. So I would say, yeah, I mean, just be consistent with what you're putting out there. I think it would be better. It would serve better that way. And again, it's one of those low hanging fruit things when people are like, it's the same music from Scream. It's like people are just kind of repeating what they've heard and what they've seen. They don't really know like the percentage of music that was used from Scream. Most people wouldn't notice those kinds of things when you're watching a movie. They might just repeat that somebody else said it. But coming from a musical background, you know, like I do just notice those things where it's like, it just doesn't seem to fit all the time, you know,
Yeah.
fit what we're seeing on screen.
Yeah, well, that's what I was about to say. Because you're more musical than myself, I would take all your points on board for definite.
Mhm.
There is another musician in the chat, so I'm going to read. He's got 3 comments. I'm going to read out. Okay,
Sweet.
and it's Andy. He does score for Halloween. He does like his own versions of the score. They're absolutely fantastic. I've done some.
Cool.
I've made some trailers that I've used his score in with his permission. So Andy said the scene where he's grabbing the knife that chasing Marion was so 1978 vibey. I love that whole sequence. Yeah, I did too.
Mhm.
That's what I mentioned. Like when he pulls the mask, he pulls the knife out of the cutlery,
Mhm.
and it's like it goes this kind of
Mhm.
similar to what you said about when you see the flat tire, you hear it going and it goes
Mhm.
doom, doom.
Exactly.
That,
Yep.
that's
Yeah,
and that's a
you get
special
the
part.
yeah, the strings pulling back and forth, and then the plinking on the piano. It's
Yeah.
yeah, those are really, I love those flavors. Yeah.
He also said the only thing that bothered me in terms of the soundtrack in Halloween is Halloween 5 with the squeaky duck noises when the
Yeah.
2 goofy police officers appear. The orchestral themes don't bother me. So yeah, whether people like orchestral music or not, you can't get any worse than those duck noises that you heard in like the squeaky
Yeah.
noises.
Yeah,
Um,
Halloween 5 is rough.
Unbelievable. And then they said the Molly and John chase track was amazing. Love the specific sequence when Michael picks up the keys and tries to open the gate. That's one of my favorite scores from that film. Is when I was just playing it to Davey before we came on live. When Michael stops doing this, and you hear John like saying, "Open the effing door." And then he stops and he picks up the keys. And see, as soon as he picks up the keys, your heart races as the music starts to pump. And I thought that was great. Whether it's reused score or not, which it is,
Mhm.
whether it's reused or not, it just gets your heart pumping. So sometimes when you reuse score for a good reason, it works out. How did you feel about that scene?
You know, I think it must work for me because it's something that, you know, didn't really raise my attention or anything. So I guess, you know, I would say that it's got to be working then, because it's not, if I'm not noticing it, then it's you know, fitting with the visuals and fitting with the moment. And I do think, yeah, there are that is one of the better like suspenseful moments that's captured there, that yeah, has that very similar feel. you know, as to when Laurie in the original runs back across the street to the Doyle house and is trying to wake Tommy to get in, and she's like, "Oh, the keys!" Like Molly kind of does there's like a little bit of that, you know, poetic sort of imagery there with her, you know, looking for the keys as well. And yeah, that's one of the moments that, you know, other than seeing that stiff powder white mask in the distance, it works better when he gets up close. But yeah, we'll get to all that.
we'll get, that's one of the biggest topics. We'll get to that. T. Parker Evans said, "I'm mixed about the score. It has some grand and finality to it, absolutely, and I love the rendition of the main theme and the homage to Psycho." Yeah. When you see the Janet Leigh, obviously our mother in real life, and you hear that kind of Psycho theme as she's talking to her, and you see the Psycho car in the background, all beautifully shot, of course, because H2 is amazing. T. Parker said, and I love the track where Laurie picks up the axe and walks back to the school and screams, "Michael!" I mean, how honestly, anyone who hates this movie, I just don't understand. But how epic is that moment with the score, the cinematography, the rule of thirds? So you get the that's hard to explain.
The long no, I know what you mean. The rule of thirds, that everything, it should be divided into threes, and that you shouldn't have anything necessarily in the middle. It should be sort of split. I like the long shadow there. I think, you know, as far as the score for me, I guess, like, because I've watched the movie like 3 times within the last week, I'm sort of like, you know, at the beginning of the movie, it would be kind of cool to give us the original score. Like let us settle back into Halloween. Let us get refamiliarized with that Illinois feel that they set up with the visuals in the first scene. Give us the original score during the opening credits. Then bring in your orchestral score. You've earned a little bit, you know, by that time, because I do think the orchestral score really works in that moment where she's yelling for Michael. But I think it's something that's a little undercut by the fact that they've already used it a couple times. Because, you know, when they finally bring in the original score at the very end of the movie, I'm like, oh, now it feels like Halloween, but the movie's over.
So I feel the opposite. I see, as soon when those 2 detectives walked out of the Marion Chambers house and they closed the door, and you hear the thunder and lightning, and it goes and it goes and it's the orchestral score. I get goosebumps. I'm like, this sounds fantastic. As soon as I first heard that theme in the orchestral version, I was hooked. I was like, this is different. But I didn't want it to be the same. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I completely forgot about John Carpenter's score. No disrespect, I absolutely love it, but I forgot about it because I was too involved in John Ottman's. But then John Ottman's one got really chopped up, and that's the only issue that I have with the score, is the fact that it was chopped up and it was incomplete, which is a shame, because if you listen to his, is it called the Portrait of Terror soundtrack? Beautiful, stunning.
Yeah, I think, like, in a vacuum, the music really works. I just don't know if I don't know if I really enjoy it with the film, like with the visuals and everything. And I think what I really love about the original theme, and the reason why it's one of the most famous themes ever, is that its simplicity. And so I totally understand that they want to put their own stamp on this thing, and I think that they can do that. Even if they want to go orchestral, I think the big issue for me is they create additional melodies in the theme when they use it at the very beginning, during the opening credits, during the, like, really not very good imitation of Donald Pleasance. I know that they had to bring in somebody. I know they didn't have the rights to the original audio, but I would say the guy that does the imitation in 2018 is far better, whereas the guy that does the Loomis imitation here, I don't really think he sounds very much like Loomis. Really? And they create their own little, I'm trying to like, sometimes when I imitate music here, you know, a cappella, I don't know if it's going to work, but there's like these little things that they add in there on the turnaround. And I know exactly to me, I don't like it at the beginning. I'm cool with it later on, but I want them to sort of bring us back to Halloween first, and then bring in their version of the theme later. So I know I'm sort of, you know, picking, but that's the whole point of this thing, right? Is to sort of just like find those specific things. But yeah, I do agree with you. Like, on its own, just listening to the soundtrack, like, I have no issue with that, taking that creative license, and of course, like, having a different interpretation of the theme, you know.
With the Donald Pleasance thing, I thought it actually was Donald Pleasance when I first watched the movie. because I thought it did sound like him. I thought it sounded a lot like him more in H2O than it did in 2018. So we're kind of opposite there.
Yeah.
Also, they did have the rights to the original dialogue. The issue was it was the music was in the background that they couldn't separate.
There you go.
It was recorded mono, I think. So they couldn't split the music with the. They can do that these days. I can do that myself now, but they couldn't back then. So they had to re-record with somebody else's voiceover, someone else's narration. But I genuinely thought he done a good job. I thought he sounded a lot better than the 2018 guy. But that's just
probably. And it's probably something I didn't notice, like sitting there in the theater in 1998. But then when you watch the movie, a couple times a year,
when you know,
okay, yeah, exactly.
Well, one thing I've taken from this debate so far, Davey, is I never thought about how the orchestral score might not go with certain scenes in the film. So when you're mixing it with Marco Beltrami and they're rushing, then they're putting the score into scenes that didn't really make sense. Whereas even before this video, I was still thinking it's fantastic. But then if I rewatch it again, I'll go, oh, Davey's got a point, because they've got an orchestral score for a girl that's washing dishes.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't make sense. Whereas I just love the score. But as you're saying that, I'm like, do you know what? You've got a point. So this is why I like these debates, because it's something that I don't think of,
Yeah, it's there were a couple moments specifically where I was like, man, it's really like bombastic here, even though there's there's one point I'm trying to remember exactly what it is, and I'm struggling to remember, but I do know in the final act, when Michael, after he gets hit on the head with the fire extinguisher, he sits up and he's doing that whole like walk down the hallway. There's really odd performance there, I think, just the portrayal of Michael, but the booming of like the timpanis, like the drums and everything, that moment, the music like really doesn't fit for me. Like, to me, it really sucks me out. But I do think I think it was T. Parker that had said, like, he mentioned the homage to Psycho with the theme, but I also think that some of the rest of the orchestral themes sort of feel like they're going for a Hitchcock feel, even though they're not. I know in that one scene they borrow some of the melody right there, but I do think there are moments where I'm like, oh yeah, this kind of has that Hitchcockian kind of vibe at times, which is sort of an old style of filmmaking, and I think maybe that's another reason why it kind of pulls me out at moments. Music is just such a specific thing. Like, you shouldn't ever really notice, like, the music should be seamless with the visuals. So if you're noticing the music, that may be a sign that it's not a good fit.
Or it's just so epic that you don't forget it.
Yeah.
But the scene you're talking about when Michael gets hit with the fire extinguisher, I actually loved the score there, because I felt it fit with the theme there. Like when he sat back up, stood up and walked after Laurie, and it was at the kind of, like you said, it was going doom 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 doom. Then he goes out in and down to the stairs and stuff. I love that scene, but again, it's each to their own. Let's just quickly check in the chat before we get to our next point. McAvoy is here. Hey, Barry and Davey, hope you are well. Yes, we are. Davey is just losing a debate. I'm
getting crushed. I'm the Joe Biden here.
No one's getting crushed yet. Lucas here as well. What pissed me off about the movie was how Michael moves, and we'll get into that, but how he moves and looks. It has nothing symbolic. I'm not a shape Nazi like Davey, but or like Dave, sorry. But the image of Michael should tell something. We'll definitely get to that. 115%. And they said, I still want to know the book Ronnie was reading to his girlfriend. She sounded so captured into it. Well, it's his book. He wrote it, didn't he? Yeah. So
he's in the middle of writing it.
Yeah. Her long, slender legs.
Leading up to two tumultuous melon breasts.
Round melon. Melon what?
Tumultuous is the worst. Like, I'm like, Ronnie doesn't know what tumultuous means, right? Because tumultuous is like filled with danger and peril.
Is it?
Isn't it, like when you say like, oh, the roads are tumultuous, it means like, or that we're in an era of tumult. It's like, it ain't good.
Oh, I never even thought of that, because I took tumultuous to be big because of H2O. There you go. I'm getting my dictionary from H2O. How sad am I? So we'll go into. I'm trying to go into the smaller bits to begin with because we can easily like squash that. Why don't we get into the acting? I think
Okay.
that's I have seen some negatives from people who say the acting's bad in H2O, and I don't understand. Like, hands up, I don't understand where they're coming from, because you've got Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Michelle Williams, Josh Hartnett, Jamie Lee Curtis, Adam Arkin, LL Cool J. Nobody in this film is bad. Even Adam Han-Bird, who's from Jumanji, and Little Man Tate, Charlie, he is fantastic as well. I don't know why people don't like the acting in the film. How did you feel the acting went?
I think it's fine. I think maybe some people, you know, it's really difficult because people will look at the original Halloween through a different lens, right? So, you know, you can say that the original Halloween is one of the best movies you've ever seen, but there are some definite issues with the acting in the first Halloween. And then they may watch something like H2O and be like, oh, well, it just looks like Dawson's Creek. I don't like the acting. I think that maybe there are, to me, it's like, maybe we just don't get enough time with some of those characters like Charlie. I think Molly is a really like understated character. There's just not much meat on the bone for Molly. We don't see much of her outside of her interactions with Josh Hartnett. And so, yeah, when it's her and John, it seems like maybe this is their first relationship. So the chemistry has like a little bit of awkwardness to it, but I feel like it's kind of natural because it seems like Charlie and what's the other girl's name? Sarah or something like that. Charlie and Sarah, you get the idea that they've been banging for a while. All right. And then you get the idea that John and Molly are like, they haven't taken that step yet. So the awkwardness sort of like feels natural to me. But I think LL.
How did Charlie get Sarah, though? That's what I want to know.
You know, it's one of the great mysteries of horror. And maybe that's another reason why people, maybe it's not that people don't like the acting, it's they don't like the characters, because I don't think those characters are that interesting, Charlie and Sarah. They're just sort of like your standard fare for like horny couple. They're just like kind of copy and paste. So maybe it's not so much the acting, but it's just like, you know, they can only perform with what's there on the page. So maybe it's more of like the writing and less of their performances. Like my wife and I, every time we watch H2O, it's like, how did he get like this kind of cute goth, or, you know, cute goth chick? This guy's like, I joked, I was like, he's 4'5" and he got this chick. What's going on? He wears these oversized, I mean, it was the style at the time, but the oversized like flannel and like the turtleneck, that outfit during their dinner, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like,
I wore that stuff as well. I wore that.
I was never into that kind of part of the fashion in the late 90s. I was wearing like band t-shirts and stuff like what I'm wearing now. I've not changed my style in 25 years, but you know, even Josh Hartnett's like his hair and everything, like I'm cool with that. I'm cool with all that style. I think LL Cool J is pretty decent here. I might like him more in Deep Blue Sea, but I don't think he's an issue as far as acting. To me, honestly, the biggest problem for me with the acting is Michael. I think the most important aspect of, you know, judging these films or ranking these films, for me, everyone has their different criteria, which is completely fair. For me, the portrayal of Michael is the most important part when thinking about how I feel about a Halloween film. And it is something that's so nuanced and just such a taste and feel kind of thing. It's difficult to describe, but I don't think the performance here for Michael, there are maybe a couple moments and shots that remind me of the original, but I think for the most part, it doesn't feel quite right. But Adam Arkin is like the hero of this movie as far as I'm concerned, like as far as the performance goes, like his performance as Will, especially going back and watching this film, you know, 3 times within the last week, I feel like I kind of wish his character were in more of the movie, had a bit more of like a heroic death, because I think his performance is so charming. And really, he's kind of like a little bit of the audience perspective here too, you know, for some of the folks that may be new to the movies and all that kind of stuff. Like, very charming. A good back and forth with Jamie Lee, who I think does a great job as well.
Yeah, he has a little Ray moment from Halloween 2018. You know, Ray says, I got peanut butter on my penis. And Will says, "I can't. I'm having my nipples pierced." It's
Yeah,
so good.
that whole scene's great where the girls are watching Scream 2 and Sarah's like, "We're gonna do a whole date rapey thing." I was like,
Mm.
man, you couldn't even make that joke in a movie
No,
nowadays. I'm
no,
getting
not at all.
wistful for the late 90s, you know?
Yeah, that was so good. Um, uh, I guess we can go into Michael Myers because I think we've been going back and forward with Michael in
Mm.
this chat. One thing, 2 seconds, sorry. Just need to find the mute. Sorry about that. So yeah, one thing about Michael Myers is we need to remember that we're not dealing with the same Michael Myers from Halloween 1 because that Halloween Michael Myers changed from Halloween 1 to Halloween 2 because he's now the brother of Laurie Strode, whereas he
Mhm.
wasn't the brother of Laurie Strode in part 1. So we have to see it. Well, this is my opinion. We have to see Michael from a different perspective in this one. He's not the boogeyman. He's not the shape. He is Michael Myers, brother of Laurie Strode.
Mhm.
Whereas in the first one, he was someone called Michael Myers, a mental patient, an escaped mental patient. We don't know why he's doing things. We don't know where he is. He's the shape. He's a mystique.
Mhm.
He's no longer those things anymore. So
Mhm.
we're dealing with a human being with a backstory now, with a family member that he's after. So when we think about Michael Myers, we have to think about it as something completely different now to Halloween 1 because he's now a relation to
It's
Laurie.
personal.
This time it's personal. So I I genuinely believe that when people watch H2O, they expect this guy to be the shape, someone
Mhm.
who's like the boogeyman, and we're not supposed to see his eyes because he's a mystique. You're like, it's
Mhm.
goddamn Michael Myers. It's the brother of Laurie. You don't have to hide his eyes. He's not a mystique anymore.
Mhm.
If you're, I've said this from the very beginning, but if you want to see the connection between Michael and Laurie Strode for the first time in 20 years, and you hide his face and you hide his eyes with the blackness, you don't have a reaction. I need, I personally need to see his eyes. I want to see
Mm.
his reaction to seeing Laurie Strode for the first time and saying, I found you. I found you. But if you do this,
Yeah.
you're like, well, what's he thinking? I don't know what he's thinking
Yeah.
because I know who he is. I know he's the brother of Laurie. He's not the boogeyman anymore. He's not the shape. He's got a purpose and a reason for going after this woman. Show me his reaction. And I saw it and I couldn't get it out of my head. Absolutely loved it. But I'm going on and I will go on and on. So I'll cut off here so I can let you get your
I'm the
point.
same way. I'm the same way, man. You
um,
can't shut me up.
but also with Chris Durand playing Michael Myers, I hear people saying he's too small to play Michael.
Mm.
Chris Duran's 6'3" and
Yeah.
Nick Castle's 5'11", so we can scrap
Mhm.
that. And they say he doesn't walk like Nick Castle. Well, he does. He walks identical to Nick Castle in the first movie. When you look at Dick Warlock from Halloween 2, he walks like a
Mhm.
robot. You look
Mhm.
at George P. Wilbur, he's like MC Hammer Daddy.
Oh,
And then
geez. Yeah.
in both films that he's in. Who else have we got? Don Shanks from Halloween 5. He was too bulky and old. So I'm not saying Chris Duran's the best, but for me, he's the best looking Michael Myers since the original because he does the exact same thing as Michael Myers. He became a cat-like killer again. He's jumping
Mhm.
up. He's faster. He's walking normally, just like he would in Halloween 1. Yes, he's 20 years older, so he's going to change a little bit. He's not
Mhm.
supposed to walk like he did when he was 21 years old. Nobody, I don't walk the same way I did 20 years ago. So I wouldn't expect that Michael to be the same. That's nitpicks though. But for
Yeah.
me, the overall feel, we'll get onto the masks later, but the overall look and slenderness of Michael just felt to me like Nick Castle. But I know that I'm in the minority. So go.
Yeah, I think there are definitely moments where maybe part of it is the direction and cinematography, the way that things are captured, to where it just doesn't have the same look. Because I think one thing that sometimes people can forget about the original is like Dean Cundey is one of the most special, amazing directors of photography of all time. The movies, especially the movies he was doing in the 70s and 80s, have this look that no one else was really capturing that look. So John Carpenter had kind of like an unfair advantage when you look at compare Halloween to the first Friday the 13th, and even the first A Nightmare on Elm Street, which is a great movie. But when you look at technically the way they're shot, you know, Halloween is just miles beyond those as far as the look of the film. So I think that's one of those things that you can lose sight of when you talk about, you know, the way that Chris Duran looks in the role. I totally agree with you about the size. To me, the size is not an issue. And I've heard you made that point, you know, for quite a while too. So where it's like, you know, even if maybe the outfit, maybe there's something about him that doesn't look the same proportionately, but I don't think he's too small. I don't think that's an issue. I kind of like a Michael that's just a more regular sized guy. To me, that's what makes Michael scary, is that it's a regular sized guy that picks his spots and, you know, does not make a mistake when it's time to go for the kill. I do think, you know, there's some of the walks I kind of like, you know, when he's walking down the little roadway with the large shadows and you kind of see him from far away. I do like those shots of the walking. Those are good. After he gets hit on the head with the fire extinguisher and he does that little weird like swivel and like dance move to stand up like a ballerina, I think that's like a little odd. And maybe it's like something we just didn't need to see on camera. Like maybe you just, you know, cut around that into where it looks like he's just, you know, emerging from, you know, like the way that Nick Castle sits up in the original film, you know, do something that looks a little more like, is that supernatural or just something that doesn't look human, really? You know, but to your point, it sounds like they're trying to make him more human here with the brother-sister connection. I kind of wish that in this movie and they would have said, oh no, they were mistaken. He's not really the brother, but he pursued me all those years ago. And I feel like he's still trying to finish what he started. Because I think the kind of hamstring, it's kind of caught up in this whole brother-sister thing. That to me, the more and more I watch these movies, I just don't know if the brother-sister angle really works for me at all. But yeah, I mean, as far as Chris Duran's size, don't really have an issue with that. I think there are a couple when Laurie's like hallucinating that she's seeing him, I don't think any of those shots work. I think Michael just doesn't, there's something about him that just looks awkward, you know, seeing him in the reflection of the window like that. I think that happens twice, right?
Yep.
That happened twice in the film. Neither one of those really, there's something like goofy and kind of clumsy about it. And maybe that's just the fact that Steve Miner is, you know, mostly a television director. He's not so much a cinematic kind of guy. So I think sometimes like just the capture of everything is not where it needs to be. But I think, you know, to go back to that whole, like the portrayal of Michael being, you know, the most important thing to me. I think there are moments in this film that just sort of miss the mark. There's a moment when he's pursuing Molly and John, when Molly and John like see him for the first time and he does the head tilt. And that's almost like, that's like a kind of like a bad fan film moment for me, because Michael does the head tilt to Bob after he kills him when he's admiring his work. But to do the head tilt to John, like he recognizes John, and to do the head tilt, like to me, I'm just sort of like, oh, this is like somebody that doesn't really understand. And they just want Michael to do the head tilt because they want the audience to go, oh, the head tilt. You know,
was he not doing it because of his work on Sarah? No, I know he was looking at. I know he was looking at
because yeah, and I guess maybe I'd have to look at a map of, because I think at that point, John and Molly had like kind of ran right around the corner, and then they see him come through the door there. So I think there are certain things where there's also times when Michael doesn't strike when I figured that he probably would. I'm sort of like, why doesn't he kill Ronnie? He has multiple opportunities to kill Ronnie. Like, that's kind of odd. There we go. Okay.
I don't want to play it all in case I get a copyright strike.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So I think they run right around the corner and they see him. He kind of does that head tilt. I know what you mean about the cat-like thing. I just think that they, you know, show a little bit too much. Again, that little ballerina move on like the two steps there is odd to me. And even, you know, I kind of mentioned it earlier when he's walking down the hall right after that, and he has this like, he's like leaning and putting his head down, and maybe it's just the way the camera is. It just looks to me not like Michael.
It's very Hollywood lit, I would guess. Like, it's obviously had a bigger budget. They could do a lot more with the lighting, and I think maybe that's one of the things that they couldn't really get right was the Dean Cundy lighting, because everybody goes to Dean Cundy for advice on lighting, and they didn't. They didn't go to him for advice, and they tried to do their own thing. And I can see why people don't like that. I thought the lighting was okay, but it could be a little bit overblown at times. Like that scene when he's walking down the hallway, I know you can see his eyes, and again, I don't mind seeing his eyes, but there are times where maybe give him a little bit more shade, because nobody looks great in that angle, and nobody looks great with that shading. So whether it's intentional or not, then of course it's not that great. So definitely there's the lighting aspect of the whole movie is something that's not the best, but I certainly wouldn't say the film's bad because of a few lighting issues, because some films in the franchise have a similar issue and are praised. So for me,
it was. Sometimes I think the lighting is what sort of, there's that difference between somebody that's predominantly successful in television versus somebody that, hadn't directed. I don't know if he had directed a film since Friday the 13th Part 3 before doing this one, so sometimes people are just cut out for television more so than they are for film. And, again, that's just kind of a taste thing. But I notice that someone like Steve Miner, the lighting is more like television looking. The shots are a little like flatter and less ambitious. Those are just the kinds of things I notice when I watch not just H2O. I think that Rick Rosenthal suffers from the same issues. It's those little differences that really, can elevate your film from just looking okay to looking great and classic. And I think guys like Steve Miner and Rick Rosenthal just don't necessarily have the chops to harken back to the Carpenter days.
That's a fair point. I genuinely thought Steve Miner done a great job. I don't think it felt like Dawson's Creek or anything like that to me. I think the only the issue with that is people say, "Oh, H2O, it looks like a film that was made in 1998," and I'm like, "Well, I hate to break it to you, but it was." It feels like a late 90s teen slasher movie. Yep, that's because it's a late 90s teen slasher movie. It's the same with, if you look at, I don't know, The Last House on the Left from 1972, people will say, "Oh, it looks too old." Oh, yeah, it does, because it was made in 1972. So films just date as they normally would. There are some timeless classics, of course, like Halloween and Psycho and stuff, that when they're shot and when they came out, but because of their masterpieces, they will continue to grow with the times. H2O is not a masterpiece, so it's obviously going to date not as well as a film that's got 10 out of 10 or a 5-star, So I'm not saying H2O is a masterpiece, therefore I know the film is dated. But for me, the film being dated to the late 90s goes back to what we were discussing earlier. I grew up loving late 90s teen slasher movies, so I'm obviously going to be nostalgic for that era. So for me, H2O is always going to be one of those go-to films because it looks aesthetically like a 90s teen slasher movie. So when someone says, "Well, it looks like Dawson's Creek," I'll say that's a positive, because Dawson's Creek looked good in the 90s and so did H2O. So thanks for giving me a positive. So
I think it makes it like a comfort movie. I think that like H2O to me it's one of the comfort Halloweens, because there was something a little like, even though those movies were slashers, there is something like a little safe and, sanitary about them. There's like, there is that level of comfort. Maybe the first Scream gets a little gorier than a lot of those other films that followed. So I think like Scream, when people say, "Oh, it's like Scream," I mean, I think Scream went a little bit further. The other films kind of like held back a little bit because they wanted to find success. And like you're saying, there's certain eras just have that style and that look. I don't think there's anything wrong with it fitting in the era that it comes from. To me, it's kind of nice that when you're in the mood for that specific thing, you've got a Halloween movie that fits that mood. And I think that's one of the great things about the franchise as a whole, regardless about like how you feel about each movie. You may find yourself in the mood to watch one, even if it's far from being your favorite. There are times when I'm like, I want to watch Halloween 4, even though the mask is like, what the hell's going on there? Or yeah, like if I want to, you know, coming of age when H2O came out, if I want to like reminisce about that, you know, that time in my life, I remember the day that I went and saw H2O. Like my friends and I drove around. It was a rainy, you know, summer day it came out in
July.
August, was it July?
Oh,
Okay.
sorry, yeah, August the 4th, sorry.
So it was like a rainy day. My friends and I all drove around, like getting amped to go see it. It was one of those days where like it rained in the morning and early afternoon, but everything cleared up by the end. Like I just remember all that stuff. So there are times when it's like, if I want to get that nostalgic feel, I dip right in. So yeah, I see what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Oh, and then yeah, Punky's World.
Yeah, he said Steve Miner directed House in 1986. Of course he did, and that was a fantastic film as well.
That's a
And
fun
again,
one.
a classic for its era. He's obviously connected to Sean Cunningham because he directed the Friday the 13th movie, and Sean Cunningham wrote that. Did he write that or produce that or something? House?
I think he produced it. Yeah.
Produced
And
it, yeah.
but you know, it's one of those weird things with directors. It really is like it's tough to describe it. It's even somebody like Joss Whedon. Like I think Joss Whedon's more of a TV guy, honestly. Like as far as
Yeah.
a director goes, when I watch the first Avengers movie, I know it was like big shit when it came out, but when I rewatch it, I'm like, man, this looks kind of boring and like TV shot, you know? And I feel like it's like his work in Buffy, whenever he would direct an episode of Buffy, which was usually like a few times a season, those looked great for television. But
Yeah.
then to me just doesn't translate as a film guy, similar to Steve Miner.
Punky said you could pair Halloween H2 with The Faculty. You certainly could.
And they did, because Hartnett was doing both movies at the same time,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Or he did one right after the other. I mean, to me, it looks like he's going back and forth filming both at the same time, because the hair is exactly the same.
Yeah, he said that he portrayed a typical 17-year-old teenager with the hair, and then anytime the makeup crew done his hair for him, he would just mess it up again. He's like, I want to
love
actually
that.
look. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
why I'm wearing my faculty hat, heading from
great.
Hornets.
I love those colors. I'm a Washington Redskins fan, and they have those colors, so I'm always a fan. There is a moment here I wanted to bring up. It's not really a point counterpoint, but I feel like it's an LL Cool J improvisation where he's like, comb your hair. Like when he just tells John that, like, I'm like, that must have been made up right there, right? And probably just because I know it was frustrating the crew. They would do his stuff, and then he would put his beanie on and take his beanie off like right before they shot. So I thought that was a cool little, you know, kind of a little bit of a in-joke jab there.
Yeah, that's definitely improv. I don't know that for certain, but that has to be improv, because it was too quippy and on the nose. I'm like, oh. And again, I'm sitting there laughing at it, thinking it's hilarious. And people will watch it and go, that's rubbish. I'm like, oh, you just have to understand.
Yeah, I think, like, to me, you know, you can, any movie, once you decide you don't like it, of course you can pick like on every little thing. But I think like that's any movie. Like I don't, you know, like I may prefer Curse to H2O, but man, there's a whole bunch of issues with Curse, you know? So it's like, I'm not going to sit here and act like, oh, just because I like it more means that I'm going to ignore. I think the best thing that we can do for, you know, as an audience and with everything in our life is just like, have a sobering look at everything, whether you like it or not, and don't try to act like the things you like are perfect, because nothing's perfect. But I think a lot of people, at least when they voice their opinions, they sort of act like, no, if I agree with this person politically, it means that I love everything about them. And it's like, and they do that with movies too, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've got two of my best friends have got the completely opposite opinions on politics to me, but they're still my best friends, you know, and they always will be. I'll always disagree with their politics because they're terrible, and mine's is the best. But but we're best friends, and it'll never change because of that.
Yeah, and in that way, like, you guys are, you know, doing a good service to one another to, you know, take in each other's differing opinions and not let it, you know, drive a stake between you and your, like, I think that's like a really strong thing you can do politically, is say that I'm not going to let these differences like tear me away from the people that I care about. Like, that is a political statement in and of itself.
Absolutely. So I think the next step we should go into, because we're kind of leaning towards this, is H2O copies Scream. Okay, so we did touch on it. I'll start by saying that's not a negative, and the reason for that is because I feel like Scream in 1996 copied Halloween. For obviously they had Halloween in the movie, and they took inspiration from Halloween. Because Scream done that and Scream became a major success, that stopped Halloween going straight to video. Now there's documentaries on it all over the place where Halloween 6 was going to go to straight to VHS, and it did in a lot of countries. It came to VHS in the UK. It didn't get a theatrical release, and the plan was to bring out Halloween 7, it was called at the time, and it was going straight to video because nothing was going right. But because of the success of Scream, and because Jamie Lee Curtis agreed to come back, because of the success of Scream, then that reignited the Halloween franchise again. So I thought it was only right for Halloween to honor Scream, because Scream done Halloween a favor, just as Halloween done Scream a favor. So they're scratching each other's backs. So when they say it copies Scream, great. And I'm pretty sure they'll agree to that because it was written by Kevin Williamson, who obviously wrote Scream. So you're going to have very similar things. Obviously, Markable Trauma that we touched on, everything that we saw in Scream, the whodunit aspect, the teenagers, all of that was in Halloween H20. But it was also in Halloween 1978. But you just don't really think about that because it's an old film. It's not like a teen slasher movie of the 90s, but it was a teen slasher movie of the late 70s, just a very rare one. So all the elements were in Halloween, the first one, but Scream just brought it back. So then Halloween H20 thought, let's do the same since we started it, and we got H20. What are your thoughts on if it copies Scream and if it's a benefit or a negative, or a positive or a negative?
I think, it's like Scream sort of threw a lifeline to the Halloween franchise there. And so it makes sense that from the producer standpoints, they probably came in and said, hey, look, this is what worked in Scream. We want to make sure that we have like this element, and this element. We want to bring in the guy that wrote Scream to write this version of Halloween, and I think that's another instance of like the kind of low hanging fruit, just to compare it, straight to Scream. I feel like if it did copy Scream, it would have been far more violent, and there would have been more gore, because I think in a way H20 plays it more subtly, kind of more like the original Halloween, where there's not as much blood and there's really not as many kills. I think there's a few off screen and then a few that you actually get to see, right?
Yep.
Because you don't see Charlie's, you don't see the two kids at the beginning. You do see Marion and Will. And then who else? Is there another person that
kind of you don't really see Sarah's?
Sarah, yeah, you see some of it. You see enough of it for me to not count it as off screen. Like, because they only show, that's a really awkward, like that shot of that's just like bizarre. I don't understand that choice there, but nonetheless, I don't think I don't feel like it really copies it. I think it's that clean, slick look that people take issue with when it comes to H20. They immediately attribute that to that whole late 90s era thing and say that it copies Scream. If it really copied Scream, they would have gone, I think in one of the original scripts, it was, they were going to do a copycat killer, and they were going to have like Charlie be the killer at some point. So that would have, at that point, man, you got full permission to call it a Scream copy at that point. But yeah, I agree with you on pretty much everything there, Barry, that this movie wouldn't exist in the way that we know it without Scream. So it makes sense that it would have those elements. I mean, The Faculty has those elements. Urban Legend has those elements. I Know What You Did Last Summer has those elements, and it was based on a book. It was way less like the book, and it's way more like Scream.
Exactly.
So that's the thing that, in pop culture, when it comes to art, you can look at it with especially films, television, and music, that it's a copycat kind of thing. That's just the way people see, hey, this thing sold a bunch of tickets, it made a bunch of money, like what can we do that's similar, right? What can we do to double dip on that, to get a double scoop?
And it's double scoop, nice one. And it's the same with the posters, like Flick Symmetry said, down to the poster layout and style. And that's not just a Scream thing, that was basically a late 90s thing, like, and early noughties, with like Soul Survivors, Cherry Falls. It kind of just branched out after maybe 2003, 2004, when they went way more digital than that. I think digital came in the late 90s for posters. So they just made these posters like that because that was the in thing to do. And it's not because it was a Scream thing. It was just what they'd done with lots of posters. And it wasn't just horror. It was all different genres.
It was like a Dimension Films thing because they did it with like Phantoms and all of those Dimension movies all had the floating head kind of poster. And I think that's, you know, another reason why H2O feels like Scream is because it's the same production company. So it's like, you can expect that, right? It's like, you know, people that grew up listening to hip hop in the late 90s, early 2000s, they remember No Limit Records, and every album art cover for No Limit Records had the same look and feel, just replace the names and replace the rapper, you know, but it all had that. It's a branding thing. So yeah, to me, I feel like H2O feeling similar to Scream and Faculty and all those movies. It's just a branding thing for sure to make it more recognizable and to be successful the way it was. I mean, yeah, what they were going to do, that Two Faces of Evil direct to video thing, if they didn't do H2O, and that just would have been bizarre.
Yeah. Another point I want to make on the copying thing and the eras is every Halloween film feels like the era that it was filmed in. Like Resurrection feels like a real world Big Brother era, which it was. Halloween 4 and 5 felt like late 80s horror films because guess what? They came out in 88 and 89. So Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, felt like those mid-90s terrible horrors that we got back in the mid-90s because...
Terrible.
Well, I'm sorry. It's like a Hellraiser movie.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Well, in fact, it almost was a Hellraiser movie. So every film came out during a time where you would look back and say, well, that looked like it fit in that era because most of the time it's because it was from that era. Oh, honest. Some of the things I'm just deleting. I'm deleting things that I've already spoken about just in case.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. I know I wrote a bunch of notes, but it's like I have a little bit of a photographic thing. So it's like as soon as I type it, I'm like, all right, now it's in the memory bank and I'll just wait for the right time.
Right. Well, here's a small bit. One of the negatives is, again, I'm getting these negatives online. I'm asking people, and one of the things was ignores aspects of Halloween 2. So Halloween 2, he got burned and got his eyes shot out, and then he's back with no scars, and he's got his eyes back. However, they did mention in H2O, you told me you watched him burn. So obviously we are assuming that Halloween 2 did happen because it's a brother. It was confirmed it was a brother in Halloween 2. It's a brother in H2O. And they confirmed that he was burned at the end of Halloween 2. So the end of Halloween 2 was indeed canon. But how is he able to walk around without eyes when he clearly has eyes and he's not burned? Well, I put that down to movie logic. And that is, if you want to give him his burns and no eyes, you will have no Michael Myers for Halloween H2. It's as simple as that. But then you say, well, why don't you just give him his eyes back, but keep him burned? Well, what's the point? If you're going to remove the wound from his eyes, just remove the burns as well. It makes no difference. I think to keep the movie flowing as it should, then give him his eyes back, give him his lose the burns. It doesn't really matter. And also, they're trying to distance themselves, not officially, but distance themselves from Halloween 4 to Halloween 6. So any recollection of what happened in 4 to 6, like he had the bandages on in Halloween 4, it was all burned. If you show that in H2O, people might assume that Halloween 4 exists. So where's Jamie? Where's Rachel? So they want to leave all the confusion out. So remove certain things just to make that Halloween 1, Halloween 2, and H2O transition seem that little bit smoother. Have you seen those negatives online about him having his eyes back and stuff?
I think I haven't seen too much of it online, but I do think it's like they slip it in there at the very after Marion gets killed and the police are in her house going through everything. They're like, well, didn't he burn up and, you know, at the hospital or whatever? And the Fritz or whatever is like, never found his body. And that's like, and that's it. It's just,
you know,
there we go.
This, Davey?
Like, no explanation. We're just going to sweep it under the rug. And we're going to, like, it's something like blink and you miss it. Or like, you know, shuffle for like a snack and you miss that line and you're thinking to yourself, what happened, because he was like charred and laying down on the ground in the hospital. So like, how did we get from the, like, where was Michael in the interim? I do think that there's a little bit that they're missing there, but I think the reason why they did it is because they knew that their audience was going to be a bunch of teenagers that just saw Scream a couple years ago, haven't seen any of the Halloween movies, or maybe saw them like once. I think that's like the idea with this movie, is like, even though it's a sequel to the original 2 films, in a lot of ways they're pitching it as like kind of a brand new start. So they're just sort of like, yeah, let's forget about the gunshots to the eyes, let's forget about the burns and all that stuff. You know, to me, it's just the thing that lingers with me, especially the last couple of times when I've been watching the movie, is I was like, where the hell was he? Like, really, where was he? Like, what was going on? Not that I need everything explained to me, but I do think that that's one of the huge liberties they take with the story here, is they're like, we're just not really going to acknowledge it. We're going to like the one little, you know, throwaway line, and that's that. But yeah,
would you really want to know
if part 2 is canon? If part 2 is canon, I would like to know. Now, if it was a direct sequel to the first movie, then that's great. You don't have to explain any of that, and then you can, you know, you run into maybe a couple similar issues that they had in 2018, where the body count isn't as high. So should the paranoia be high? But I do think that when you include part 2 as part of it, they really just sort of skate by that. They're like, don't worry about that. This is
what's the difference between the end of Halloween 1, like if he disappears on the lawn and then he appears 20 years later in H2O, what's the difference between that and him falling, burning in Halloween 2 to disappearing and appearing 20 years later? Well, I don't see
I think it's because the last time we see him in Halloween 2, it's just focused on that burning mask. There's no like, you know, they don't show like the spot in the hallway where he was, that like, you know, there's a burned out spot and he's not there. Like, if they wanted to like replicate the same thing from part 2, or they wanted to like retcon that with a shot or something, I just think every film is contrived. Every script is, I mean, that's what it is. There's contrivances. That's what you do when you write. But that, like, especially, you know, recently watching it, I'm like, man, they really like don't want to talk about that. Like, they want Halloween 2 to be canon. They don't really, but they don't. They only want the brother-sister connection from Halloween 2. That's, you know, really the only reason why that film still exists in the canon here.
But the problem with Halloween 2 is it was shot and written as the final Halloween, like the final Michael Myers. So I feel it's unfair to H2O because of that, because they're honoring Halloween 2. They're not doing a Halloween in 2018. They're honoring the story, and they have to work with what they've got. So, of course, yeah, he's lying on the ground. You could actually see his face burning, or something burning in that mask. But they can't get away from that. They just have to excuse me, they just have to brush over it and say, do you know what? He's gone for 20 years. I actually prefer Michael Myers being gone for 20 years and not knowing where he is. And because Laurie Strode's now scared. She doesn't know if he's going to pop up. Whereas in Halloween 2018, she's an absolute mess, even though she knows where he is. She knew where he's been for the last 40 years. So I think we can go into this anyway, because that's one of my points, Laurie's arc. I just feel like Laurie's arc in H2O was way more believable than her arc in the Halloween David Gordon Green trilogy. So the fact that he's gone for 20 years and she doesn't know where he is, I think that's good. So if they explained, well, Michael Myers was here, he was here, and he was here, then she doesn't really need to worry because she knows where he's going to be, unless it's only the audience that know. But the fact that nobody knows, I thought that was quite a good mystery. We need to keep something mysterious of Michael Myers, and I think that would have been it.
Yeah, and maybe they could have met in the middle, and I'd feel more positive about it. So you don't necessarily have to have him with like both eyes shot out, but maybe at least that one eye that was poked out in the first film. Like, maybe, you know, especially if you are going to show not just his eyes that they show, but they show like this whole like inch underneath his eyes a lot, because the eye holes will get into the mask, but the Stan Winston mask, you know, exposes some of the cheek. So what they could have done is they could have been like, almost like the shark in Jaws 2, where it's like half of his face has been damaged. And so that way you sort of give a reason to show more of his face. You do show that battle damage. The police officer at the beginning could have said they never found his body, and we've heard of sightings that no one ever took seriously since then. You know, like just some sort of like, I feel like, you know, they're just sort of, they're really skating past it. And maybe that's one of the reasons why people say this movie looks too clean, looks too teeny boppery and all that kind of stuff, is Michael himself looks very, very clean. There's none of the battle damage from the first two movies at all. You know, and maybe if they just met somewhere in the middle, that would have been cool. If we're going to see some of his face, it would have been cool to see. Like, I love how they did that in the 2018 version. He's got like that cloudy eye and stuff like that. It's those little touches that make it feel like, and here's a Dave McRaeism, connective tissue from one film to the other. And I feel like H2O, for most people that dislike it or just don't feel as warm to it as they do with other films, I think that other than some of the things that are said, as far as what you're being shown, because film is a visual medium, the connective tissue is largely lacking as far as what we see. H2O on paper, it's amazing. Like, if you just read a novelization of H2O versus a novelization of 2018, it's clear that H2O, just reading it, is, you know, works so damn well, like probably works better. But unfortunately, film is a visual medium. So it's like seeing those things and seeing the capture and the portrayal of everyone in H2O, I think, is lesser than something like 2018, even if certain elements of the story work better, such as Laurie's arc, which I do think works better in H2O than in 2018.
Do you, what movie do you prefer overall, 18 or H2O?
18. 18's probably, it's like second or third favorite in the franchise for me.
Right, okay. Interesting. So
I kind of wish that they used the Laurie from Ends as the Laurie in 2018, and then used the Laurie, like flip those Lauries, kind of would have been cool.
Well,
but they didn't know where they were going. They're, you know.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, that's one of my points of Laurie's arc is in 2018, she's scared, even though she knows where Michael is. And then after Michael disappears and her daughter is killed, she's happy as Larry. And I'm like, it should be the opposite way around. Whereas in H2O, it's clear and concise. She's changed her name. She moved to California. She doesn't know where her brother is. She's a borderline alcoholic. Her partner, her relationship broke down. She's a single mother now, and she's scared because she doesn't know where Michael is. So I feel like that's a more realistic Laurie. So that Laurie's arc, and I think that's one of the positives that a lot of people agree with. I know that things that I've been saying, a lot of people disagree with, but I'm positive and confident that that's one of the things that people prefer in H2O, is Laurie's arc is much stronger in this movie than most of the other ones that she'd been in. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think the first act of this film, which, you know, carries most of that, where you know, get to see what she's going through. She's alcoholic and she's popping pills, so she's kind of going at it from both angles. She's still having nightmares. She can't trust her boy, or she hasn't found it in her until this Halloween to, you know, tell her boyfriend what's really been going on. And I think all of that works so well in this movie. The setup is very well earned. Her performance is like, Jamie Lee Curtis performs the hell out of it, especially when they're sitting there having lunch and she's, you know, sort of trying to hide her tears as she's talking to Will. And then, you know, when she chugs that glass of wine and tells the guy to get her another glass today. Like, that's relationship goals right there, is her relationship with alcohol. I think that that's one of the stronger things about the movie, something that I've grown to appreciate more of the film, even though I do think, in the middle and the end of the movie disintegrates and kind of ends with a little bit of a whimper. I do think the first act is pretty strong. I know. The head getting cut off, I really like that, but everything else with the end is just, what? That's it? That's the end of the movie? What happened?
Oh, wow. So Punk as well, I don't agree with this, but he said she also got over being an alcoholic really quick. I don't think she did, because it showed that obviously with the wine today, she was still battling her alcoholism. And then when Will came over, she took a bottle of vodka out the fridge as well. So she was definitely still dealing with alcohol right up until the point where she had to go and save her son.
Yeah, so she gives herself like a mug of or a glass of the vodka and then goes and swishes the mouthwash. Those are telltale signs of, you know, the thing about alcoholism, it's not the fact that you're drinking, it's the fact that you're hiding it is the telltale sign
Mhm.
of the disease.
Yeah, absolutely. So will we get into the big one then? Michael Myers masks, plural.
Oh man.
Masks. So I think I've got an image of all the masks. Um, we'll not talk about it yet, but I'm just going to click on them all to show you them. So we've got
Yeah,
the terrible curse mask. We've got
it looks beautiful right there. The
what is
terrible
that?
curse mask.
Yeah. We've got the stunning Stan Winston mask. We've got the KNB mask.
Oh god. I'm
What on earth
so
would it
glad they redid that shot for the final film because that's from the trailer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's really bad.
we've got the infamous CGI mask.
The Keanu, I call it. Put that back up there real quick if you don't mind, because it's you cannot unsee it. That is Keanu Reeves. Whoa.
Really?
To me, it looks like Keanu quite a bit.
At
At least they kept the hair. They didn't try to redo the hair. At least there's that.
That's true. Right, so one thing I know before I show the masks again is there's 4 masks in this film, including the CGI mask. So I
Mhm.
know the masks are an issue in the
Mhm.
film, but is it make or break for a Halloween film? I don't think so. And I'm a Halloween purist. I don't think the type of mask is a make or break. Look at Halloween 4, one of the worst masks in the franchise.
Yeah.
However, I feel that Halloween 4 is one of the stronger films in the franchise. And it's the same with H2O personally. The masks are an issue that in the fact that there's more than one. Just like Halloween 4, there's more than
Mhm.
one. But
Mhm.
I feel like the masks don't overtake the story itself. Do you feel like having more than one mask is an issue, or do you understand that sometimes shit happens and they need to use a different mask?
I think that, the difference between at least the way they shot the curse mask and then some of the shots of the Stan Winston, I think those two look similarly enough in certain shots, and especially because they hardly use the curse mask. I think that's okay. I think the CGI mask is pretty much like unforgivable, and that's the reason why everyone always brings that up. And I
Yeah.
think the K and B mask is so that shows that the production was a shit show.
Whee!
It shows that the producers, that the people in front of and behind the camera did not have a grip on what they were doing. This film must have been rushed, even though they knew it was going to be a massive success on the heels of Scream and everything, and bringing Jamie Lee Curtis back. No one stepped in and said, we're reshooting all of these shots with this dreadful powder white, stiff, small featured, awkward looking K and B mask, which blows my mind because I think K and B does some of the best like effects work, but this is one of the worst masks I've ever seen. It looks like a bad spirit Halloween mask that a child would wear because the parents want to wait until they're older to get them a real Michael Myers mask. What's with that nose? And what,
Well,
like, he's making this face. He's going
but
like,
they actually didn't rush. It wasn't a rush production at this point because this was the
that's one
chosen
Steve.
mask.
Yeah, Steve Miner liked that mask. So that's on you, Steve. That's one of the reasons why you were relegated to television, bud, because that's a dreadful choice. They should have reshot all of those scenes because I tell you what, man, I probably didn't notice in the theater, but every time I watch this movie, it ruins the final act for me.
I don't.
Every like back and forth shot is Stan Winston, K and B. Even when she's fighting him in the dining hall, and it feels like I'm in a whirlwind, like I'm in some like sort of tornado with these two masks that neither one I really like, but obviously the Stan Winston is the superior mask between those two. So I think very similarly to what we were saying with the music, it's not so much that it's bad. It's the fact that there's no consistency. It's all over the place. Like, who is in charge of making the decisions here? Because it seems like this is an example of a boardroom making the call because they're like, from the producer's perspectives, we're just we're taking the Scream template for the most part and we're trying to apply it to H2O. But they didn't want to actually, it doesn't seem like they really had the best intentions in mind. It seemed like, let's just get this thing going. I think that they should have reshot the whole thing with the Stan Winston mask, and the movie would be, even though I don't really like the mask, it would have been elevated, a couple spots, at least in my ranking.
Well, the story goes, as far as I'm aware, is the makeup artist or the effects artist made this mask, the KNB mask, and they started using it. And Steve Miner was the one that said he didn't like it. So he said, "Can we reshoot
Mm.
using using a different mask?" So they brought on Stan Winston. He made a mask that was very similar, in my opinion, and his opinion, award-winning Stan Winston, that it was the closest to the Halloween 1 mask that we've ever had, and it certainly was. So they reshot as much as they could with the money they had and the time that they had. Seeing the KNB mask and the Stan Winston mask in the same scenes didn't bother me because the KNB mask was mostly in the distance or getting covered by the fence or blurred out. So I know I could see it, but it wasn't bothering me because I knew I knew there wasn't two killers. I knew there wasn't
Yeah.
so it's the same guy. It's supposed to be the same mask. So it didn't bother me. But I genuinely believe that this mask here, the Stan Winston mask, apart from the hair there,
Or the hair all the time.
well, some people say that they hate the H2O mask because it looks like an afro, but they love the resurrection mask. And I'm like, where is it? I need to show this. They love the resurrection mask because it's not an afro.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's literally an afro.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's pretty rough.
sometimes I just don't get the gripes with H2O mask. Now, I know you mentioned the eye holes. The eye holes in the H2O mask are the same size as the Halloween 1 mask, believe it or not.
Oh, so it must be kind of the way it fits Chris Duran versus the way Nick Castle. Yeah.
That, as well as the lighting, like we mentioned, like when it's
true.
lit, you can see more. The production stills of the Halloween 1 mask are all you can see right down here because it's lit for a photograph. So the eye holes are round about the same size. The shape, everything about the H1 mask is, and again, this is just what I see, is similar to that mask. But when it comes to where is it? This monstrosity.
Oh my God, it's so beautiful.
I just
Well,
can't.
yeah,
You can fit two necks in there.
that shot right there, you're cherry picking.
Yeah, but that is the mask. That's the mask that everybody loves. That's 64% of people prefer that mask over the H2 mask. It's
yeah.
mind-blowing.
To me, it looks way more like the original mask than the Stan Winston. I like the stringy hair that's combed back instead of combed out. I think that looks more like the original, especially in that opening scene. There are some shots where I'm like, this looks, the way they light it and the way they shoot him from the side or from behind, like right there, that to me looks so much. Let me know in the chat. Am I off? Doesn't that look very similar to the original mask? Like I really do think it does. And I think the cool thing about the original mask is no matter what lighting you put it in, it's going to look kind of different in every light and sort of uncanny valley. I think the Stan Winston mask, unfortunately, only looks good when it's shot. If Michael's looking down, there's some shots where he's like this and it looks really menacing. There's like where he's looking down and he looks tough and scary. That to me right there looks goofy. That last shot that you showed, better than the K&B, but it looks goofy when he's shot head on. When the Stan Winston mask, it's like, to me, it just doesn't look right. But when it's shot from above, it looks good.
I just think the forehead of the curse mask is terrible. It looks like he's got lines coming down here, and it looks make him look like an evil monster. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it just there's lines on the head that just shouldn't be there, and it takes me out of that mask. And it looks like it's made of clay, like it's a heavy piece of like porcelain, and that neck, again, you can fit two heads in that mask. And
well, if you don't tuck it in, because that one shot, that shot is like, I don't think Michael looks like that throughout the majority of that film, especially like in the opening scene when he takes the nurse and like sticks her up on the spike and he does the head tilt. Like, I love the way Michael looks there in Curse. But I mean, it really is a taste thing. So it's one of those things where it's like, I can't fault you for it. I can explain why I don't like the Stan Winston mask as much. Can you put up that shot of him when he's stabbing Sarah again? Because talk about foreheads. It's like a light bulb. Like his like, you know, the shape of the mask is just a little too almost like a little too form-fitting. It's not like there's not much like looseness. There's no, notice the cheeks don't really have any sort of indentation, whereas the original mask has some indentation on the cheeks, and so does the curse mask. If you go to that shot of him killing Nurse Marion, you
Yeah.
see
I know
you
what
see a
bit you
really
mean.
cool shading there on the cheek that, to me, that little dip there is so similar to the mask from the original. So,
That's
and
too much shading, I think. It's like, because it goes down like it should, but there's too much coming back up the way when there wasn't any on the original.
but even it, so if you look at the, they use the original mask for the cover of like 4 and 5, it
Mhm.
has those indentations. So maybe when John Carl Buechler made that mask, he's kind of, going off of, again, the original mask, the beauty of it. The reason why we always talk about these damn masks is because that first one is friggin' perfect. They're
Mhm.
like, every angle he looks different, but it's the same mask. There's something like shape shifting and bizarre about it that really leans into that whole idea of the shape. And I think, unfortunately, like the shark in Jaws, they struggled to find that, like, that,
Yeah.
perfect spot when making the masks. And I know you make a great point, when you bring up, Ottman and Beltrami and Winston, that these guys are award winners, that they're, some of the best in the field. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything they create is up to the level of like
Yeah.
award winning. And I think that Stan Winston here, unfortunately, I think it's easily not his best work. The hair, for me, if the hair were just stringier and combed back, I think that would improve the mask so much more.
See, I think the problem with Stan Winston was he was living in 1998 at the time. So I think, again, times have changed. Like,
Mhm.
the masks that they make these days, they can replicate anything these days, which is
Yeah.
great. And I think if they could do that, they probably would have done that in 1998. But I don't believe they had the right stuff to do it, because if they did,
Mhm.
I think every film in the franchise would have done what they had to
Yeah.
do, but they just
Yeah.
couldn't get it right.
It's like it's like William Shatner threatened to sue them, so they couldn't use the mold, or you know what I mean? Like, or they couldn't try to like recreate a mold that was similar, and I think that's, I feel like the John Carl Buechler one gets pretty damn close from 6. I totally know what you mean. It does look heavy, the clay thing. I totally get you. But I understand why they didn't use it here, because they didn't want connective tissue to be, with curse. So I totally, I love it too. I hope Barry grabs some stills here and just post some of the stills of those. But yeah, the Stan Winston mask is the best one of the bunch, but I don't think it's great. And I think just a huge detriment to the film, something that I have a tough time letting go of when I watch it, is just the inconsistency
Yeah.
takes it down. Because again, for me, the portrayal of Michael is so important when I'm talking about my opinion. So of course, those moments like when the white face mask comes out to the top of the stairs and there's like a light right above him and you see him for a couple seconds. And then, man, especially when Laurie's like stabbing him with the flagpole and stuff like that in the dining room. Almost every shot going back and forth is Winston, K&B, Winston, K&B. And it's so powdery white. It's like, have you ever seen that Romero movie Bruiser, where the guy has like the white mask?
I've
Like
not, but I know what you mean.
To me, it's just like, what were they doing? It looks so like you can't light that mask properly, because even in shadow, you can see that it's white as the pure driven snow.
At least they recognised the problem that they had, but obviously it was a little bit too late.
Yeah.
But going on to this mask, for those of you who don't
Yeah.
know, the reason that the CGI mask was there is, again, timing restraints and budget restraints. They only had literally days left to finish this project, and they couldn't go back and reshoot that scene again. So they had to use the KMB mask for this scene because it was in that
Mhm.
scene, and they just replicated a CGI
Yeah.
monstrosity above it. And again, it was what, 1.5 seconds. It didn't bother
Mhm.
me, and I knew exactly what happened as soon as I saw it. And I think they knew it as well. But it's who was it? Miramax at the time, Dimension. They
Mhm.
they were just like, we need this out now. Come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. And because they were rushed, this is the sort of thing that happens. You know?
Yeah. I think the story that I remember, and I could be wrong, but I think they just missed it. So they didn't even know until they were in post and they were going back through everything. And they're like, oh crap, we missed this when we were doing our pickups, because it would take time, right? To do the CG thing must have taken quite a bit, because by 1998 standards, it's not like it's that bad. Yeah, I mean, back in 98, I think CG for the most part, lighting is what it struggled with. And I think that's the reason why it stands out here, is because the lighting is just sort of, there's like a silvery shimmer to it that doesn't look very natural. I think it's odd that like when Charlie first bumps into Michael and there's literally just like a split second, maybe 0.2 second flash of the CG mask. Like, that's okay. To me, it's curious that they retain the shot. It's almost like, well, don't go back to the shot. Like, you don't need to. You can just go right to the eyeball, seeing Charlie in the reflection.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's one of those things where it's like, why did you do it? Like, you should have been like, no, guys, it ain't going to work. Let's just cut it out. Not that they knew that 26 years later, people would just be droning on about it. I do think it's funny, Barry, whenever because, you know, you're a tried and true H2O defender and very proud of it. And I'm proud of you for being proud of it. But a lot of people do just bring that CGI mask is like the one thing, you know, oh, but the CG, and it's like, you're right. It's for a couple seconds, but it is really odd that they didn't just nix it from the final cut.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
odd. And again, it's something that I have to accept as well as a negative, because it's a negative, simple as that. Again, it doesn't make or break the movie, in my opinion, but it does for some people.
And each one of these movies has those things, like, you know, the Tivoli scene from Kills, really, you know, I think Kills is great, but what the hell's going on with all that Tivoli stuff? And like, to me, the Tivoli stuff is like the CGI mask in H2O, where it's like,
oh, really?
I wish it weren't in there, but it is. And I still enjoy the film, you know, regardless. But yeah, it's something that, to me, I think the K and B mask is a far greater sin, because it undercuts the climax of the movie that would be great if they just had one damn mask.
That's a shame. I'm going to go into the chat, because some of you guys are telling us about your feelings on the masks. What else have we got? So Punky said Michael kept the mask he used at the beginning of H2O in his suit to pull out later on. Michael kept the mask he used at the beginning of H2O. I don't get it. I might be a joke. I don't know. Apologies. They should call the resurrection mask the Boondocks mask, the Boondock Saints. Vanderhoff said the afro is only in 2 shots of the movie. Is that the resurrection one you mean? I saw it in most of the film.
Yeah. The face part of the mask from Resurrection, like the face looks good in a couple shots. But yeah, the hair is wild. And I think Boondocks, I think he's referencing the cartoon, the Boondocks.
Oh,
the black family, and they got the kids have afros.
Oh, right. I've not seen that.
There is something very African-American looking even about like some of the facial features. I don't know if that's politically incorrect to say, but I think it's, you know, different cultures, people that grow up in different, or people that are from different parts of the world, there are certain features that are more prominent. They may not be across the board, but to me, I kind of get that vibe a little bit from the Resurrection mask. It's like Black Michael.
That's the thing. If you start to see features in the mask, then they're doing it wrong, because it's supposed to be a faceless mask, you know.
It's supposed to be unremarkable. Yeah.
Punky, I actually love Punky now. He said the curse mask is my least favorite. I'm leaving that comment up for the rest of the video. I'm only joking.
There you go.
But I don't agree. I don't agree, but it's not a good mask in my opinion.
Yeah, it's however, one of my favorites.
Vanderhoff said the Halloween 6 mask is the best part in the beginning of H2O. There you go. Someone smoking too much weed. Again, guys, I'm just joking with you. Everyone's got their opinion. However, my opinion's right. Punky said the curse mask also looks like it has too much neck. Oh, absolutely. The most neck you've ever seen in your life.
No, part 5 has the most neck. Tuck in your mask.
Well,
bro.
yeah, it does. Yeah, that's the thing. 6 mask is not terrible. It's just baddish. Flex Symmetry said, I suppose if you're going to get nitpicky, those masks must come out every Halloween for kids to buy. Otherwise, how would he get a hold of one even similar to what burned up in 81? Yeah, and that's absolutely true. He's not going to get the same mask every single year. However, the chances of him getting a similar mask every time he escapes or gets out is quite rare. But
they live in a world where people celebrate a mass murderer by producing a mask similar to what he wore in 1978. It's an interesting world.
Yeah, that's all we can go by, to be honest. Let's see. Yeah. Eli said, Michael is getting a bit old. His hairline is receding there. Yeah, you could look at it that way as well.
And again, too, I think it's like the way it's shot is a big thing with the Stan Winston. There's some shots in the movie where I'm like, damn, it looks really good. I totally get why Barry loves it right there. When he's pursuing Molly and John on the little trail, and he like kind of gets up, but you see him from like this angle. He just looks like he has this, you know, stern look on his face. Again, it's not too much of an expression. It just sort of gives me that feel. But then like that shot on the hallway where Chris Duran is leaning forward, I think, and being shot from below, I think the mask looks dreadful there, you know? So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
I know. So I think it's time we should get on to, well, my last point. Again, you might have more after this, but the finale, I've heard you talking about the finale a couple of times, saying that you were really underwhelmed. Obviously, the head chopping scene you thought was good, but the lead up to that in the finale, you felt wasn't good. Am I right?
Yeah, to me, it seems really like, I don't know if they edited parts out. It seems like they realized, crap, we need to wrap this up within 90 minutes, which I actually appreciate that it's got a nice tight runtime and everything. But it does seem like kind of blink and you miss it with that final confrontation. You know, Laurie and Michael, it's maybe the last, you know, 10 or 15 minutes of the movie or so. You know, John and Molly just are sent off and disappear pretty much. You know, I thought that was odd. I thought it might have been kind of cool if they all sort of had to keep on dealing with Michael. And of course, you know, you have to write that within the story and all that kind of stuff. But I felt like the fight with Michael and Laurie was pretty truncated. And then again, it's the switching back and forth from the K&B to the Winston mask. Just, I can't not see it. So I'm paying more attention to that than I am the action within the movie. And I know that's my own personal problem, but anytime you're being pulled out of a movie, it's not a good thing. Like when your suspension of disbelief is getting played with, you know, it's a problem. So to me, that's like a big part of the end of the movie that feels like, man, they, in that first act, they lay this amazing foundation for what could be an epic showdown. And then I feel like it just sort of fizzles out. And until you get to Laurie, you know, pulling the gun on everyone and stealing the van and all that stuff, then it's like, okay, cool. Now we're like, I like that, the true ending, not the false ending bit before it.
That's interesting. I think you're possibly the only person I spoke to that has some issues with like the finale of the film. The finale, I've just checked it there. It lasted 16 minutes between the time Laurie went face to face to Michael to the moment she chopped his head off. That took 16 minutes. I feel like 16 minutes is an ample time for Laurie versus Michael. Like, if you look at Halloween Ends, that lasted minutes, and you could blink and you'll miss it. But I personally feel like the ending, as in the finale, the last act, was epic. Like, there's no other way to explain it. It's Laurie Strode battling alcoholism for the last 20 years. She doesn't know where Michael is. And she's finally stood up to him because he's obviously trying to kill her son as well, because he's there. And she's thought, I'm going to take a stand, because if I don't, I'm going to be running for the next 20 years again. And I felt like it was epic. I don't have any negatives that I can say about the finale. It wasn't quick. It wasn't long. It was a great amount of time. 16 minutes is a great time to enjoy Laurie versus Michael. And yes, I know that Molly and John kind of took a sidestep after that whole meeting between Laurie and Michael. But as soon as they locked eyes, you knew there was about nobody else at that moment other than Laurie and Michael. And I'm glad that they just went, right, you two get into the cupboard, because it's time for me and Michael to fight. I was happy with that, because I didn't go into the film to see John fight Michael. I didn't go into to see Molly fight Michael. I wanted to see Laurie Strode versus Michael Myers. She's a young woman still. She's younger than I am.
She's like supposed to be like 36 or 37, I think, in the film.
37, yeah. She's 37. So she's a young woman. So she should still be able to take care of herself and defend herself against Michael Myers, the human being, the human brother, because, again, it's not a supernatural Michael Myers. So I think the stakes were set high and I was blown away. And then even when I thought it ended, it went on that little bit longer with her taking over the van and
Mhm.
then going down that hill. I had no idea what was going to happen. Didn't get it spoiled for me. Then when she like smashed him against a tree, I was like, right, what's going to happen here? And then I just, even when she picked up the axe, I still wasn't thinking she was going to do this. And then when
Yeah.
she'd done it, I just went, oh, no
Yeah.
more Michael Myers. Like, it's
Yeah.
done. I can't believe that they actually done it. And it was amazing.
Yeah.
So the finale is, honestly,
I love, yeah, and I do love that bit. Like I love chopping his head off. I love that you get the sting from the original film, and then it goes right into the track from the very first film. Like I think that's a really nice way to kind of bookend it and show you know, the connection to the originals that way. So I guess my thing is, if John and Molly are you know, the focal point is split between John and Molly and Laurie throughout the movie. I mean, especially John and Laurie. And then so to have him not really even be a part of fighting Michael, to have him not be able to team up with his mom, because you see the stress in their relationship at the beginning of the movie. She's like, you can go camping with me. And he's like, I don't want to go with you. Like, it would have been kind of cool if they had a bonding. Yeah, exactly. It would have been cool if they sort of had a little bit of a bonding moment to where I know he's been stabbed in the leg and all that kind of stuff, but where John has a bigger part of fighting Michael. It sort of seems like, well, why are these characters in the movie if at the end of the movie, in the most critical part, it's just going to revert back to Laurie versus Michael alone?
Well, I felt
Also,
like, oh, sorry, there you go.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I felt like there was that bonding moment when she told Molly and John to get out of there. And he's like, Mom. And she's like, I'll be right behind you. I'll be right behind you. And she was literally crying. And he was, oh. And then she's like, go down to the Becker's house, Casey Becker's mom and dad's house. Go down to the Becker's. And I thought that was quite a somber, sad moment that she's sending her son away because she needs to fight this now. Otherwise, her son's never going to live a normal life because she couldn't live a normal life. I thought that was a good finish point for John. But hey, that's
kind of would have been cool if they decided, you know what, screw it, we got to go back. But the audience doesn't know that we're going to go back. And then instead of, you know, LL comes in, even though, oh gosh, we need to address that whole thing at some point. I'll talk about that after that. They play a trick on the audience by showing Michael walk around the corner and then turning it into LL once the gun's being fired, which I hate, because they're lying to you, because Will isn't having hallucinations. It's from Will's point of view. And I think that is such a, I don't like when movies do that. I think that's like not the way to create that kind of suspense. Again, something you don't notice the first time you see the movie. You think your brain's playing tricks on you, but the more you watch it. So instead of having LL like prevent Laurie from killing or from stabbing Michael, that maybe that's John, or maybe even John comes in earlier and like helps her. And I also like, man, when they're in the dining room and she's like hiding under a table, I'm like, this is, you know, Scooby-Doo level hiding tactics. This is, Michael would have seen her under the table, like easy. Michael standing on top of the table to me is like the most un-Michael. I don't know what it is about him standing on the table. I'm just like, is he Ghostface now? Because it seems more of like a way that Ghostface would pursue. And flipping the tables is a cool, again, like the head tilt towards John and Molly. It's one of those things that like sounds cool. You're like, oh, and he's going to like walk and flip the tables. But to me, it just sort of is like, well, this isn't the cat-like, I'm going to wait for my opportunity and get you, you know, he's so like swift and everything throughout the whole rest of the movie. But here he is doing this like grandiose table flipping thing. To me, doesn't feel like Michael Myers.
Because he's evolved. That's what I'm saying. Like he's found Laurie Strode. Again, in my eyes, he's found Laurie Strode, and he'll stop at nothing now to kill her. She's in his sights now. He's like a shark, so he's flipping those tables. He's like, "You're mine now. I need to get you." He's going for the blow. Like, he's going for the stab. He's not like kind of waiting around, apart from standing on the table because he doesn't want her to see him. But I don't know. There's everything. I'll always defend those last 16 minutes because they were just epic. Like if you compare the last 16 minutes of this movie to the last 16 minutes of every other Halloween film, it's the best.
See, I think that 2018, I think the ending of 2018 is far better than this one. I think that maybe it would have worked even so with the tables, instead of flipping, like, is he a shark or is he a cat? Is he nimble and smooth, or is he a driving force that creates a mess everywhere he goes? Because I think it would have been more like Michael Myers for him to walk between all those tables, and he just knows where she is, and he just grabs that one table and goes for the stab, and she like rolls out of the way or something like that. There is that connection. There's the brother sister thing, that he doesn't need to be grandiose and flipping everything, because he, just knows where his sister's at and just goes for that one. And it's splitting hairs as far as like what feels like Michael Myers and to one person and what doesn't to another. But those are the moments to me that it's like, oh, I can tell that, Kevin Williamson wrote this, because this seems like the way that a Scream movie would end, with these more like, grandiose, like, gestures, and, a killer that's making more of a kind of a stink about everything. Whereas I feel like Michael would just kind of pick his spots. When he walks behind Ronnie, when Ronnie's checking out, worst security guard ever, when Ronnie's checking out the car, just leave the gate open, check the car. Like, you don't even have to go out there. You don't even have to open the gate. Michael walks behind him like silently on a dirt road. So it's like, okay, so there's the Michael that can walk silently on a dirt road. Then there's the Michael that's like flipping tables.
That's a good answer.
I guess I'd rather just see him keep that kind of cat-like picking his spot sort of thing.
But so would you rather he just continued with the cat-like actions and just like, I don't know, like kill Laurie the way he did maybe the nurse in Halloween 2, and then it's done?
No, I think I would just rather that he's more, that it's more like focused. It's not so much like thrashing around. It's more, like he has, even though there's no way you can like plan for these instances, but that he's just like more deliberate with his actions.
Mm-hmm. Here's a good question. I think I know the answer to this. Is Nurse Marion Chambers the only character to die twice in the franchise? I think there's 3 characters to die twice in the franchise, as far as I'm aware. And that is Nurse Marion in H20 and Kills, Laurie Strode in Halloween 4 and Halloween Resurrection, and Dr. Loomis, who died in Halloween 2 and Halloween H2, as well as Michael Myers, of course, died in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, Halloween 2, the original Halloween 2, Halloween H2, so he's obviously died multiple times. Yeah. Can you think of anyone else?
I can't, no. And the Nurse Marion kill in H2O is way better than the one in Kills. I feel like they kind of, I don't know why she was really there in Kills, other than the actress is alive and we want to bring her back. Kind of like Charles Cyphers, like they're alive, let's get them back. Let's just find a way to make it work.
Yeah, I think the problem with Charles Cyphers is he was totally underutilized for Kills. Like they literally just brought him in because he was willing to do it, and that was it. Why kill him off? Just like let him have his moment to mourn. I know he's had 40 years to mourn his daughter's death, but at least let him shoot Michael and let him run away, because he wants to kill Michael Myers. Don't kill him off. That's terrible.
Yeah, they went full dark mode at the end there.
It's a shame. Do you have any other points you'd like to make then, Davey, about
let me
how amazing it is?
About how amazing it is, yes. Let's see here. I think I covered everything I've got here. Yeah. So I covered all the notes that I've got, covered all that. So yeah, I think we've got everything that I've got for you as far as H2O goes. A movie that I loved so much the first time I saw it, and it's just been kind of slipping for me since then, unfortunately.
It's a shame because when I look back on the Halloween franchise, I don't think any movie in the franchise has slipped or risen really high or really low in my rankings. Like when I look at a film like, I don't know, Halloween Resurrection, it was always near the bottom, if not the bottom. And then I look at a film like Halloween H2O, it was always near the top. so every film kinda stays where it is. Or it maybe jumps up 1 or 2 or goes down 1 or 2 depending on how I'm feeling. Or if another film comes out that I like more or like less, then obviously it will naturally move in order. But do you feel like H2O then is the one that slipped the most for you? Or is there any in the franchise that slipped even further? Or even went higher up?
I think that H2O, you know, the David Gordon Green movies kind of helped push it a little further back because those movies are all, you know, in the top part of my ranking, I would
Right.
say. Part 4 has slipped as well because I essentially look at part 4 as like, it's basically a remake. I mean, they make certain, you know, references to the original film, but as far as like the plot points and every, you know, the points that it hits is pretty much the same as the first movie, and the mask is absolute garbage. Like the 4 mask is a damn joke. Like he should have been in bandages the whole time. That movie would be a few spots higher in my ranking because again, Michael's portrayal is the most important part. So that goofy mask that's just like like it's just got this like this silly like surprised face and talk about an awkward looking forehead. I mean, oh my gosh, it's like, is this guy trying to, you know, is this some sort of guy trying to date my mom or something like so yeah, I mean, I would say part 4 and H2O have slipped the most. You know, like I said, I watch this movie at least once a year, sometimes twice. But this is one of the ones I'll put on like while I'm like doing stuff in the house or something like that. Because if I sit down and try to pay attention, I'm either going to get bored or just more inspired to like put on a movie that has a portrayal of Michael that I enjoy more. But it is fun to notice, you know, to see that damn K and B mask and just have a laugh. So sometimes it works for me in that way as well.
Yeah, I'll be honest. The Halloween 4 mask for me used to be the worst mask in the franchise for me, but there's something about it now that I enjoy looking at. And in fact, when you look at the Trick or Treat Studios version of Halloween 4 mask, it's actually pretty decent. And I'm like, that's maybe better than I first thought. I think everyone compares every mask to the original. And at the time when Halloween 4 came out, it was a horrendous mask. But just looking at the mask on the Trick or Treat website, I'm like, do you know what? It's not the worst mask in the franchise. I still feel like it's that peacock looking mask from Halloween 5, where it's got the big long beak.
It's
and
bizarre.
the neck goes out like this and
Yeah.
away. And I'm like, who made that? It's shocking.
It's like the Nicolas Cage mask, you know. It's that's what people say. Or yeah, Nicolas Cage meets Alec Baldwin from Beetlejuice when they like pull the beak out. It just it is bizarre. And I think one of the issues with the part 4 mask is that maybe it's just a little too white. That it doesn't have like a duller tone to it. And I think also the way it sat on George P. Wilbur's face, it looks a little thin. Sometimes it looks a little like wrinkly and stuff. There are shots like in the Meeker house where they have that blue lighting and you see him in the background, and then he admires his work after he stabs Kelly with the shotgun like through the door. Like there are shots in part 4 where it's like, man, they nailed the lighting and they found a way to make this goofy mask look good. But when it's brightly lit, when he kills Bucky and he's just like, he's like, what the hell? Like, what's with these? I feel like sometimes it's like, who is in charge of picking these shots? Or, you know, did they not watch the original movies? What happened?
Think they genuinely didn't think about it. I think they thought the mask was the least of their problems. They probably just think characters, Haddonfield, Michael Myers, Dr. Loomis. I don't think they would think about the mask. Like Flex Cemetery said there, the big shoulder pads in H4, like they didn't need to be there, but they were there anyway. So I don't think they really cared what Michael Myers looked like. I think it's only now they look back and go, okay, Michael Myers is the most important character now in the Halloween franchise. We know that because everybody rips apart some of the looks in some of the movies. So we need to get that right. Finally, they got it right in Halloween 2018 onwards. Like, I don't think anyone can complain about how well Michael looked in those 3 films. The mask, his face, the burns, his build, everything was there. So I don't think anyone has any complaints about Michael in any of them. Even the flashback Michael portrayed by Aaron Armstrong.
Yeah, it's really good.
Perfect. Even the mask. perfect.
The Mask is great. I really like that one too. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
So
think they probably didn't think that we would be like poring over these movies in great detail, and
yeah,
obviously they probably didn't foresee, 4K that lets you see things that you wouldn't even see on the actual original film stock, which I think is one of those weird things within fandom. Like, I know people love their 4Ks and stuff, but it's like I don't want to see the strings and all the stuff that when they transfer something to Blu-ray and 4K, sometimes they don't do all of the diligent work that you need to do to make sure that the effects still maintain that illusion. And so I
yeah,
think sometimes it's also like we're seeing this like more clear than you would ever see it. Like even back in the 80s, you watch it in the theater, you're not even able to rent the movie for another like 9 months, back then.
mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah. They shot the movies with the intention of what they could see through their cameras. But if you
Mhm.
upgrade that now to see absolutely everything, then you're going to see all the inconsistencies in how they were shooting them.
Yeah.
And they said, and this is a good point, Halloween 4 bandage mask could have been upgraded later on with the film, with the bandages slowly falling off, revealing his hair, almost creating
Mm.
a new mask because of it. So imagine it's like his hair kind of popping out, and you can see the hair
Mhm.
dangling like the mask, but it's still white, and you can't even see his eyes because of the bandages. Maybe you could see little slits that you could
Mhm.
see out of. So I
Yeah.
think that would have been a better mask to use, and I've
Oh
said that
yeah.
loads of times. Like just having the bandages, like Friday the 13th Part 2,
Yeah.
the
Yeah, you
sack
don't
head
really
mask.
have to you don't have to feel like you're married to that original mask, like, because it was the third time that Michael had been shown on screen, so they could have taken it a different direction, and then in every movie, it could have been, a little bit of a different look that he goes with just depending on what's available to him. But yeah, I think that a big thing for me is that if that bandaged look was throughout, it probably would be part 4 would probably be in my top 5, but it's, closer to the middle and the back of the ranking, unfortunately.
Annie Brackett died twice. That's right. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2
Yeah.
and Halloween 1. She died. So
Mhm.
that's another character that sadly died twice. Although, should we really count the remakes as I'm thinking of that because it's the same
I don't
character dying?
Yeah, I don't really count it because, yeah, it's not like a continuation of the original. It's not really the same character. It's a totally different like universe,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So, yeah, we wouldn't count that really then. Oh well,
Yeah.
that's fine because it's a remake. It's not even part of a different timeline. It's literally away from that branch of timelines. It's
Yeah,
its own thing, which is probably the least
exactly.
messy. It's the least messy timeline out of the rest of them.
Oh yeah, for sure. I even think you can watch in a strange way, you can watch the first film and then go to Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 as the sequel, because there are multiple movies that sort of like retcon the ending of the previous movie to sort of like serve their story, like Back to the Future 2 did that. Of course, like the Evil Dead movies kind of did that as well. So,
Uh-huh.
you could do something like because I actually enjoy Rob Zombie's sequel like immensely more than the first one. I don't really care for his remake. I think it's kind of pointless. So it's kind of interesting. You can jump from that original ending of John Carpenter's Halloween, go over into Halloween 2 Rob Zombie, and it's like a way to marry those two worlds. I know I'm in the minority here, Barry. I know you don't like
Hey,
I
um,
think it's, to me it's like smack dab in the middle, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, whereas Rob Zombie's remake is like snuggled up to Resurrection at the end of my ranking.
mhm. Yeah,
Um,
that's fair. Well, again, I've got Halloween H2O as my number 2, so I can't
yeah,
talk. I can't say anything to anyone.
that's
But
batshit crazy. No, I'm just
and I wouldn't hide the fact, that I know that I'm in the minority. When I say I'm in the minority, I know there's still quite a lot of people out there that think H2O is one of the best, if not the best
Mhm.
sequel out there. So power
But
to
like you
them.
were saying at the beginning of the stream, we kind of live in this world where people say things are the best or they're the worst. So
Yeah.
if you have any criticism, even if you say you liked something, but you have like one or two little things that you don't like, people are like, "Oh, why'd you hate it?" Like you get those comments all the time,
Oh,
when you're
all the time.
talking about Scream 6 about like, well, technically it's the worst and this is why, but this is what works for me. And people are like, "So why did you hate the film?" It's like, that's not what we're saying here. And it's same thing with H2O. It's like, I still get enjoyment out of watching it, but just like everything else, I'm gonna look at it with like that sobering point of view, and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna act like there's not flaws there.
Well, I said that Scream 6 was good. And because I said it was good and not the best film ever, I get called a Z-honest. You know what I'm talking about? People who don't
No.
like Jewish people.
Oh, gotcha.
Don't really want
Gotcha.
to say the word. So I get told I was one of them. And I get told I hated Scream 6 because I said it was
Yeah.
just good and
Mhm.
not the best film ever. I said it's the worst film in the franchise, but that's not a bad
Yeah.
thing. I think Evil Dead 1 is the worst film in the Evil Dead franchise, but I still think it's amazing. But people
Yeah.
just don't understand. They're like, well, if you think it's the worst, it means you hate it. I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you not understanding?
Well,
But
yeah, because we live in a world where everything's like dichotomies. So it's like if you didn't love it, you hate it. The nuance has sort of been lost, and that's why it's really cool to have this kind of discussion with you, where we have differing opinions upon the on H2O, but neither one of us is getting like worked up about anything. It's like
mhm,
because I think the best thing we can do when we're talking about art, when we're talking about politics, whatever it is to try to listen to one another, have a nuanced opinion, maybe take something, maybe somebody says something that starts making sense to you and you can work that into your own opinion. And then the worst thing that's going to happen out of that is you're going to have a more well-rounded, more informed opinion. You're going to be a better audience member. You're going to be able to decide for yourself what works for you and what doesn't, and more importantly, why. I think
mhm.
that's like a huge thing. But if we can't have nuanced conversations, then that means if somebody's going to shut off and not listen to your why, they're just going to listen to the plain statement and then tell you what you believe,
Yeah.
then communication is just like falls apart. We can't have a conversation about anything because it seems like in this world, the modern world we live in, it's very difficult to have conversations about anything,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
I think the good thing about this video that we've done today is I completely understand why you don't think H2O is the best sequel. I completely understand why you don't think it's the worst. But every reason you've given for not liking or not loving H2O, you've given a reason, like every opinion you've given on it, you've given a reason for it. And
Hmm.
that's a good thing. And I'm hoping that you can understand why I think H2O is my second favorite movie in the franchise, because
Hmm.
I've explained myself.
Yeah.
I've not just said to you, H2O is the best, and that's it. Like
Yeah.
people do,
Yeah. It's not a tweet. So that's the cool thing about having a conversation too, is it's not like this sweeping statement. Yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. And I can, having the experience of being, a fan of yours and an audience member for, years now. It's no secret that you're a huge fan of this movie. So in a way, I've been preparing for this since I first started watching your videos, Barry. And I also feel like hopefully people in the chat aren't like, I'm like, man, am I too nice? I'm not going to like put something on and act like over the top about my opinions, because, the things that I don't like, I'm not shy about talking about them. But
Mhm.
I guess I could have gone a little tougher, played like, good cop, bad cop with it. But I've had a blast just kind of going over everything. And yeah, I think that I can certainly see that you understand my points. And I think that's one of the really cool things about film is you can be like, I totally get it. Your point is completely valid. But when I watch this movie, I feel so good. And the stuff that works for me really works.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Totally agree with you there. T Parker says, I have ends as my number two, so I understand. He's talking about when I get the hate for Scream 6. And it's the same with me, T Parker, with Halloween Ends. That's my third favorite in the franchise.
Mhm.
And people just can't understand. They think that I'm riding this bandwagon where I'm just pretending to like Halloween Ends to be different.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I've already done numerous videos on Halloween Ends as to why I love Halloween Ends. I don't think I need to re-explain myself over and over again.
Hmm.
I would if I could or had the time to do it in a tweet, but you get 160 characters to do it. And for me to squeeze that into 160 characters would make it look as if I'm just lying to you. So I
Yeah.
always say to people, just watch my video then. And they're like, no, you're a YouTuber. You know nothing. I'm like, okay, it's fine. It's all
Yeah, I
good.
mean, it's funny because people on the one hand will say like, "Oh, you're just a contrarian if you say that you don't like something that is popular." So
Yeah.
it's like I was pretty lukewarm on Abigail, and it's like, "Oh, you didn't like it," and it's like, "No, I liked it just fine. I did not love it." And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you're just being like contrarian. And then if you like something like Halloween Ends, they're like, oh, you're just like doing that to be cool. And it's like, well, which one is it? Is it like, when is my opinion, which is totally subjective, like when is that valid for you, good sir? It's just like, you know, what are we talking about? Like, why does my opinion hurt your feelings about your opinion? Like the two don't cancel each other out. It's really funny because I think some people think that, you know, number one, they think that they take things personally as if they worked on the movie if you dislike it or like it. And then they also are like, why are you telling me my opinion's wrong? And it's like, well, that's not what it is. You know, it's just the prelude to a conversation. Whether or not you want to take part in that conversation is another discussion. Because I see a lot of comments, you know, on some of your videos where you can tell that people maybe listen to the first like 30 seconds and then stop the video, drop down in the comments, tell you you're wrong, didn't listen to anything. Like it's a common thing, and it seems to happen to your channel more than I notice it anywhere else.
Well, I'm quite tactical in my videos because I will put a title and my thumbnail tactically to see if people will listen to. So I can't even think of an example, but I'll put a video out there, I'll put a thumbnail out there and a text in the title. And if people comment based on the title only, then I know they've not watched the video. So that kind of helps me decide if I should reply to them or not, or just reply to the people who have actually took the time to watch the video and then genuinely comment. So that's the reason I do that. Some people think it's clickbait. It's not. It's tactical so that I can wean out the people who don't watch the videos and only comment based on thumbnails and titles. So,
and it is good marketing. I think like even when I did like a reaction to the Acolyte trailer, I put like, does anyone even care about Star Wars anymore? Was the title. And people were jumping in being like, actually, I care a lot. And I'm like, sweet. The bait on the hook worked for you. Because you probably wouldn't have said anything if I just put trailer reaction. There'd be nothing, you know?
So you need something for someone to click on. It's the same if you see on Twitter, if someone says, I hated Halloween Ends, and I would reply back and say, I liked Halloween Ends. And then they reply and say, I wasn't asking you. I'm like, well, you put it out on Twitter, giving your opinion. I'm just giving you my counterpoint. If you don't want anyone to reply, don't comment. Or are you just looking for people to say, yeah, I agree with you. You're so cool, you know? So you can't win. So,
or they're like, you like H2O, so why do I even care about your opinion? People do that, you know, and I see like Lee from Drum Dums gets that, where people are like, you like Ends, so why should I listen to your opinion on anything? It's like, okay.
Fair enough, you know. So that's why videos like this it's more of a debate. And I think people who are watching this video either live or if they're watching it after the fact, they can maybe get something out of it and go, do you know what? Both of them have made a good point. And whether I agree with their points or not, at least they're giving an opinion and a reason for their dislikes and their likes. And I think that's all that really matters, is our opinion is the most important opinion to us. And that's it, you know?
Yeah. And I think like a lot of people, you know, more and more within the community, I think people are looking, you know, I think most people do look for more nuance in this world. Whether or not that's what we see when we go online, that's a totally different thing, because I think the more over the top statements and stuff like that just get more attention and more clicks and all of that. But I do think there's a group of people, you know, especially within the horror fandom, where they do want to have these genuinely fascinated in knowing what other people's opinions are and why. And that it's like, it's fun to have the conversation. Like, to me, it's, you know, these movies and, you know, whenever you enjoy art, it's an escape from all the serious stuff that we deal with in life. And so there's no point in getting worked up over something that is relatively inconsequential. So I think it's really cool to see people in the chat here, just, you know, a lot of people saying, yeah, I'm pretty lukewarm. You know, it's like, it doesn't always have to be that love and that hate. And yeah, I think that's something that should be encouraged and acknowledged for sure.
Well, I did a video today, a video called Why Long Legs is Called Long Legs. And somebody posted a comment saying, did this really need a effing video discussion? And then I just wrote back, shut the F up. And that was it. So I like to treat people how they treat me. But sometimes when you talk back to them the way they talk to you, they then get back to you saying, you can't say that to me. I'm like, Why not?
Well,
I don't work for McDonald's. I can do what I want.
yeah, well, and it's funny too because it's like, what? Then why did you engage? Because sometimes if
Yeah.
I see something I disagree with, like, am I really going to spend a good part of my day and my emotional energy and get my blood pressure all raised to have an argument with somebody I'm never going to meet when
Yeah.
they're probably not interested in listening to me? So sometimes I see something and I'm like, all I'm doing, if I make my own post about this or if I comment, all I'm doing is like keeping it going. And the only way it's going to suffocate and die is if people just stop commenting. So this person that wonders why you put the video out, they could have just not said anything and moved past it. You know, it's it's kind of like the whole, you know, when all that Melissa Barrera stuff was going going on with Scream,
Yeah.
you know, with her falling out of Scream and everything, people like really started drawing the lines in the sand there, you know, and regardless of how I felt about it, I was like, man, all I'm going to be doing is be giving into like the darkness that's going on here by contributing to this conversation. And then it's really funny because a couple weeks ago, we found out that she wasn't ever fired. It was just that her contract had already wound up and they decided not to bring her back. So it totally paints. But now the narrative's already set, Barry, where she was fired. Spyglass fired her. And so it doesn't matter what the truth is, even though she came out and said, actually, it was just that my contract was up.
Well, they did come out and say that they're not renewing a contract because of certain things, but that's obviously by the by.
And that's fine, right? Like she has the freedom to say what she wants. The people that aren't even her employer anymore can make a decision on whether or not to bring her back. Like it doesn't, like there's no, I mean, just like you said about working at McDonald's, like if you said certain things, your employer might be like, hey, Barry, you can't say that. Like, you know, you can't talk about what you just did at work the other day on your YouTube channel. Like, you know.
I won't say this person's name because it might get flagged up, but someone was shot.
Is that real?
Okay. I don't know. And then they said it happened at a rally. And
Oh my
then
gosh.
somebody said that, where is it? The shooter was killed.
Wow.
So it's all going down.
Oh my gosh.
I need to check that out with me.
Crazy.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, hey, you know what? We certainly have issues in this country. And one of the funniest issues we have is that people that play like, you know, act like it's, you know, this is my team and my team versus the other team. You know, they believe that the other team is the devil, regardless of which side they're on. And they believe that everything that they do is justified. But if the other team does the same things, it's not justified. And so we live in this strange world where it's like, you know, there's a lot of static, maybe too much communication and too many people, just like the Melissa Barrera thing. It's like sometimes a narrative is set before all the pieces are out there. And then once we have all the pieces to put the puzzle together, somebody else has already put together their own puzzle and convinced everyone that that's the answer when it's not. So it's wild, man. I can't believe, like, that's totally bizarre to me. What a crazy thing to have happen while we're on the stream together. That's pretty wild.
And we had over 30 people. We had over 30 people watching our stream at one point, which is amazing considering all this is kicking off.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I guess that might decide the election right there. You never know. These events like this can, you know, kind of push things over.
But
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'll do a few more comments before we wrap up. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, you know, we were talking about like the masks in the movie, just to bring it back to Halloween real quick, is what would you think about, so people have talked about like a deep fake of like, when is somebody going to do a deep fake of Halloween 4 and put the original mask on Michael? Would you be interested if somebody could do a deep fake of H20 and just literally put the original mask like in every scene, not to have it replace the movie that you love, but would you be interested in watching that version and seeing like how it would affect your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be really interesting if somebody had the time to do that. I know that somebody did a deep fake of the CGI scene with the Stan Winston mask, and it looked pretty good. And that was just obviously 1 or 2 seconds that someone done. So it can be done. It's just the time that it takes to do something like that. Obviously, you need to get the shading right and stuff.
Yeah.
I would be interested, not just for H2O, but for any film in the franchise, like Halloween 4 and 5. I think
Oh
my
yeah.
experience of those films would be a whole lot better if the mask was better. I'm not saying it would change my opinion on the films, because the films are still the same, but aesthetically, I think it would maybe light my eyes up a little bit. You know, definitely.
How about the curse mask in part 1? I'm just joking.
Oof. I would never watch part 1 again. Clayface. Flex Image said, I've never made a negative comment about anyone's uploads, regardless of what I think. It takes effort to post videos, no matter how silly, and life is too short to care that much. And that's
what's
absolutely
up.
100%. You know, I might do a video that takes me, like my Halloween retrospective video that I've got H2O that's due out on the 4th of August or the 2nd of August or something. It took me weeks to prepare that. It took me a full day to record it, and it took me a week to edit that. So it took me like the best part of 3 weeks to make that video. And I know when it goes live, I will get someone who says, I'm talking rubbish, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And if only they knew the time and the effort that goes into making a video, not just that one specifically, but a video, it's a lot of time and effort that people our age don't have the luxury of time. So hopefully, even if people don't like what I'm saying, they appreciate how long it takes to do these videos, because they're not easy to make, you know?
Yeah. That's why I do a lot of lives and everything, because, I don't mind the pre-recorded game, but even a simple video, like even just a movie review, your videos are, you've got a really great like skill with editing and everything, and you do pour in that time. But even for something simple like a movie review, just with like overlays of still images, the editing process for me is like 2 to 3 times the length of just recording the video. So, sometimes it might take 8 to 12 hours to like do a review, shooting and then the post-production. So yeah, I mean, when people jump in there, I really like that point you bring up, Flick Symmetry, because that's a great viewpoint to have, to realize it's the same thing like you were saying with movies, Barry. Like no movie's 0 stars, because it's a huge, hundreds of people sometimes that make a movie. And so you have to, just at least appreciate the effort and the fact that they did create something. And so I think anytime though somebody talks some mad shit in a comment, I look at their, profile and I'm like, oh, you got like 2 subs. I'm like, yeah. There's been a couple times at the beginning of YouTube where I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll really like take that under advisement, since like you don't create any videos and you're not even in this world. So why would I care about your opinion? And then I've even had sometimes where lost my train of thought.
Oh, you know what you're going to say? No,
it flew away.
Well, look at this one then. What's on your Halloween shirt?
So mine is the let's see here. It's the image of PJ Souls.
Yeah, I like that one.
Choked out there. I got that at H45. I love that shirt. The one with him down the hallway.
I think it's Cavity Colors. Cavity Colors, is it called? Can't remember.
Cavity Colors. I don't know if this is Gutter Garbs or who it was. They had a whole booth at H45. I actually got the Curse of Michael Myers. I wanted all of them, but I got the Curse one because it's that shot of him right before he hits Deborah with the axe, and I just love that shot with like the sheets, in the background and everything.
Jean said, Barry, you're amazing. Oh, thank you very much. Enjoy every video you do. Keep up the awesome work. I'm sure she feels the same about you as well, David. David. David, your Sunday name.
You can call me Dave. Yeah, no, people call me Dave, David, Davey. I don't, they all work for me.
Big D.
Yeah, Jean is great. Jean shows up to every video, every stream. Jean is the first one to drop in a comment after the streams, which is super helpful, Jean, because the live streams just don't get as much legs after the fact. So it's really great when people jump in after. And I really appreciate your support. I mean, people like, especially like myself, with a relatively new channel, like having somebody like you, be a subscriber and show up everywhere is so helpful and encouraging and awesome. And I feel the same way about Barry. I've been watching Barry for a really long time. He's been, one of my big YouTube crushes for a great while now.
Thanks very much, David. Well, we're coming to the end anyway. So while we're on that topic, David, where can people find you if they're not subscribed to you?
Yeah, so it's really easy. You can just look me up, Davey Deathray. That's the channel here on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter as well. So yeah, I've been doing a whole bunch of live streams. I've got a weekly late night talk show on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern. And I go live every Sunday to just sort of like chit chat with everyone who wants to show up. My wife and I have a series called Movie Date with Davey and Kate. Sometimes we review a film. Sometimes we have a stream of consciousness discussion about a film that we really love. And then like other times, like tonight, we're actually doing a live watch along and commentary. Tonight, we're doing Jaws 3, which is my least favorite Jaws movie. So that means it should be fun to talk about. So, going live, dropping pre-recorded videos, and then, doing as many collaborations with great content creators as I can. So yeah, check me out. Let me know what you want to see more of on the channel. And yeah, if you've dug this video, you'll probably dig what we do over there.
Yeah. Well, as always, David, I will put a link down. I think I've already done it anyway, but there'll be a link to your page that if anyone wants to click on who hasn't done it already, then by all means click on it. And again, David does similar content to myself, guys. So if you like what I do, then hopefully you like what David does. However, David doesn't love Halloween H20, unfortunately. So should we give him the love that he deserves? Maybe not.
Yeah. Just come on over to at least come on over to the channel and throw me some shit. That would be fun. I love good-natured rimming. I'm the youngest out of 5 kids, so I'm used to I can take a joke or a jab in stride.
Yeah, that's the same with us. Like in Scotland, we grew up with the jabs and jibes. So I think when people do it to me online thinking that they're hurting my feelings, I'm like, that's nothing compared to what I've heard growing up as a kid. Like that's just like kindergarten stuff. But yeah, you need to have thick skin doing what we do. And we certainly do.
And not take it personally, because I think most times people reach out and they're just trying to they want to see if they can get you upset or riled up. Like I had one person that was like, I can't believe you did a video about this thing. And I was like, they're like, I might have to unsub. And I'm like, that's fine. The great thing about YouTube is like, you can sub and unsub however you want. And the other great thing is it's my channel and I can do whatever the hell I want. And you don't have to enjoy it. Like, and they were like, wow, I've never heard it put like that. Maybe I'll give you another chance. And I'm just like, wow, we just reached an understanding. Like, God forbid.
I like it when people comment saying thumbs down. And I'm like, right, well, I said, well, thanks for being one of my biggest subscribers, because not only did you watch my video, but you took your time to click on one of the thumbs, and you're a subscriber as well. So you're one of my super fans, and they never get back to you. So
when people drop a comment and you're like, thanks for the engagement. Like, I don't care. Like, talk shit. It'll just keep it going.
And your thumb up and thumb down still counts as a thumb. So like, regardless of how many thumbs that you get, you should still get lost in the algorithm somewhere. But there you go. But we've came to the end of the road, guys. The end of the video. This is episode 4 of Double Scoops. And before we go, I always forget to put my my outro. But I'll get that in a second. So yeah, we're ready to rock off, guys. So it was great having you on again, Davey. We'll definitely be doing another one of these. Do you like Scream?
I love Scream, and my wife, that's like her favorite slasher franchise. So we watched the Scream films a whole hell of a lot. They were, I mean, man, for growing up when we grew up, it was the resurgence. It felt like slashers were gone for so long, even though horror was still being made. At that point in our lives, it was like a third of our lives where there were like virtually no slasher icons. So when Scream came out, it felt like this, man, it's come back in a big way. And how cool is it that it's Wes coming back and bringing us something, brand new and kicked off a whole new generation.
So I think I'll need to have you on my Scream podcast then. I do the morgue. So it'll be interesting to have you on. We can chat about Scream, but that's for another video. But yeah, that'd be good to have you on that. So for those of you who are still watching, guys, look out for Davey on my podcast in the near future. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
I'll be right back. What are you waiting for, huh? Coming to get you, Barbara.
Never played in the cat.
Someone's in the back!